Hello and welcome to today's MegaCast, enabling data protection, DRaaS, and disaster recovery capabilities. Today's event is produced by Actual Tech Media, and my name is David Davis. I'm excited to be your moderator for today's event. On this event, you'll hear from experts from Cohesity, Dhruva, Clumio, Datrium, Zerto, Nutanix, and Unitrans. What an incredible lineup we have for you of the most innovative and exciting data protection solutions on the market available today. If you've never been on a MegaCast before, the format is fast-paced, solution-focused. We want to help you get the answers to all of your data protection and DR questions. We want to help you to do it quickly and efficiently. You never have to leave your home or office, and you have a chance to win some very cool prizes. After all, this is a MegaCast, and we have some mega prizes on the event today. I'll go into more detail on those in just a minute, but first, we have a little bit of housekeeping we first need to cover. I'll cover the eligibility requirements for those prizes in just a moment. I'll be announcing the prize winners after each presenter on the event today. We want you to get all your questions answered, and to do that, we have a questions tab there in your audience console. Just click on questions right next to handouts, and there you can ask your questions. I'll be queuing up the best questions for the dedicated Q&A sessions that we'll do with each presenter on the event today. I also have some poll questions for you. I'll bring up those questions and you answer those directly in the slides window. So thank you in advance for your participation. Social, we want this to be a social event. You can tweet directly from your console using the hashtag ATMMegaCast, and the hashtag will be automatically appended. And then resources, we have a number of handouts and links from each of our presenters there in the handouts tab on your audience console. Now on this event, we'll be announcing the winners of our 5 Alienware Aurora gaming desktops. These boxes have 32 gigs of RAM, 9th generation Intel i7 processors, SSD drives, plus a terabyte of storage, a nice big graphics card, and you'll play some amazing games on these Aurora gaming desktops. These are today's grand prizes, but wait, there's more, as they like to say on TV. We'll be announcing the winner of an Amazon $500 gift card after every presentation on the event today. So make sure that you stay tuned throughout the event to be eligible for the prize drawings, because that is the primary eligibility requirement, but there are some other eligibility requirements that you should be aware of. The link is there in your handouts tab for the full legalese of the prize terms and conditions. All prize winners must submit an IRS Form W-9 to Actual Tech Media. We will reach out to you after the event to award your prize. Now, something we've done through the MegaCast and EcoCast event series over the years is, thanks to generous attendees who win prizes and choose to donate their prize values to charities, we have donated thousands and thousands of dollars to charity. And the charities that we are supporting this year, in partnership with the Gorilla Guide Book Club from Actual Tech Media, are the Dan Fossey Gorilla Fund to help protect gorillas in the wild, and the One Tree Planted charity to help plant trees around the world. If you win a prize and you'd like to donate the prize value to charity, we would love to help you donate to these charities, and Actual Tech Media is making a donation to these charities for every MegaCast event that we run. And by the way, if you'd like to learn more about the Gorilla Guide Book Club, visit gorilla.guide to sign up, and it is completely free. Now, the hashtag for today's event is ATMMegaCast. I'll be monitoring the hashtag throughout the event. I'll be tweeting on the hashtag, and I encourage you to do so as well. Again, you can tweet directly from your console. Today's event is brought to you by Actual Tech Media. Feel free to follow us on Twitter, and I am David M. Davis. Feel free to follow me as well. Now, we've been posting our latest and greatest content over on LinkedIn, so make sure you follow Actual Tech Media on LinkedIn. You can do that using the icons on the top right-hand side of your console. There's an icon there to our YouTube channel, our LinkedIn page, and our Twitter homepage. You can subscribe to Actual Tech Media as well over on YouTube, Facebook, and the 10 on Tech podcast. And now let's kick off today's MegaCast with our keynote presentation. That comes from Mr. Ed Tittle, consultant, freelance writer, researcher, and industry veteran. Take it away, Ed.
Hi, my name is Ed Tittle. I'm here to introduce today's subject matter. First things first, you're here to check out today's Actual Tech Media MegaCast about data protection, DRaaS, and disaster recovery. Now, a little about me. I'm a longtime freelance writer and researcher based in Round Rock, Texas. Some of you may be familiar with my Exam Cram book series, which made its debut in 1997 when Windows NT4 ruled the certification world. These days, I work as an occasional expert witness and blog for GoCertify.com and Win10.guru. I also write articles and bespoke work for various websites, as you see on the slide. Over the next few minutes, I'll bring us all up to speed on the state of data protection and disaster recovery in 2020. Some of you may be relatively new to data protection, often called DP, and disaster recovery, likewise called DR. Some of you may have decades of experience or one or both of these areas. My information is intended to provide a level set for everybody, and hopefully you'll find it useful and interesting. Data protection involves all the things we must do to make sure data is safe and secure, including keeping it private and confidential. With DP, the primary goals are to make sure that data is accurate and that it's available to authorized parties. Backup provides one key tool for data protection because it makes sure an extra copy is always around, but access controls and ongoing access audits are also important. Disaster recovery, or DR, is best understood as a processes and procedures which may be automated, manual, or some combination of the two. They're intended to restore an IT infrastructure so it can resume operation after some kind of loss or failure. DR is a kind of subset of data protection with a specific focus on recovery. A disaster is anything that stops IT from working. Today, the biggest threat to IT is actually ransomware, but natural disasters such as fires, earthquakes, hurricanes, and so forth still count. Disaster Recovery as a Service, also called DRaaS, is a cloud-based version of DR. Basically, DRaaS automates DR and takes recovery into the cloud. Thus, rather than failing over to a secondary physical site, DRaaS permits organizations to fail over into the cloud. When it comes to DP and DR, it's important to remember that they are intended to improve IT reliability, availability, and efficiency. DP focuses more on minimizing data loss and unwanted disclosures, but both DP and DR seeks to maximize IT uptime and reliability for infrastructure, applications, and data. Data protection covers much more than backup. It's not just a good idea or good IT policy. Data protection is also a matter of law. The UK and the EU have more monolithic, well-articulated data protection laws. The US is more of a jumble, but each country or region has regulations governing how data can be used while protecting individual privacy and personal information. Privacy protections cover many aspects of digital and real life, including education, finance, internet activity, location info, medical records, political activity, and more. Private information even has its own life cycle, with rules to govern how it may be collected, stored, used, and ultimately disposed of. Controlling data is a vital part of DP and includes managing data access, ingress, and egress to protect privacy and confidentiality. Access must also be tracked so that it can be audited should that access need to be checked and verified. Numerous key factors play into the discipline of disaster recovery, or DR. It all starts with planning and preparing for disaster and often involves putting systems and technologies in place to assist. Ultimately, DR is all about returning an organization to continued normal operation through a recovery process. Certain key metrics play important roles in assessing DR progress and success. These include recovery time objectives, or RTOs, which measure the time it takes for recovery to happen, and recovery point objectives, or RPOs, which indicate how much data might be lost when a recovery occurs. Not coincidentally, this is also the time window that backup must cover. DR must be shown to work through practice or dry runs, which walk an organization through the process to ensure that recovery meets its metrics and produces normal, ongoing IT operations. Today, DR solutions are changing thanks to the introduction of automation and cloud technologies. These help to ensure better DR metrics and usually swap a physical failover site for a virtual cloud-based failover environment. Cloud-based DR also offers advantages beyond handling actual disasters that include easier and more frequent testing, detailed reporting, and audit support, and more. Even so, the DR lifecycle still revolves through its normal phases, as always. Finally, it's time to say a big Texas howdy to DRaaS, Disaster Recovery as a Service. DRaaS takes one-off, highly customized processes and procedures for recovery, often called runbooks, and helps to automate them while targeting the public cloud to replace a failed or unavailable IT infrastructure. DRaaS uses public cloud platforms such as AWS, Azure, and so forth to provide compute, storage, and networking capabilities into which IT infrastructures can fail. It does so most expeditiously by snapshotting VMs or containers at a primary site or cloud location, then bringing them up in a secondary cloud location. Failover involves finding and starting up those VM or container snapshots and using them to stand in for primary IT infrastructures. Thus, DRaaS not only offers recovery from on-prem data centers or private clouds, it can also offer recovery from one cloud location to another as well. Automation is essential for DRaaS because it provides tested, reliable tools to make the recovery process work correctly and as quickly as possible. DRaaS also usually supports some or all of a number of other features too. These include the ability to run DR tests that don't interfere with normal DR operations, plus the ability to check actual runtime environments and configurations against what will be recovered. DRaaS also makes it much faster and easier to fail over from primary to secondary infrastructures when called upon to do so, and likewise for failback when the secondary is shut down and the primary takes back over again. Throughout their operation, DRaaS solutions offer all kinds of reports to help control and manage costs, track metrics or SLAs, audit activities and data access, and more. Thus, DRaaS represents a vision for fast, safe, automated DR that today's vendors will talk about at length. That concludes my introduction. What you'll see here on this final slide are pointers to professional societies and organizations that offer training and certification in the areas of business continuity, disaster recovery, and data protection. I've also included pointers to some of my recent articles for Business News Daily on related certifications. You can find a link to this PowerPoint deck on my homepage at edtittle.com or by writing down this bit.ly code 38KO1D9. All letters are lowercase. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Ed. Great presentation. That's a great way to give us some level setting on the state of data protection, DRaaS, and disaster recovery. We all now have a solid foundation of what these technologies are, what they can do for us, how they work, and what to look for. Before I introduce you to our first presenter, I've got a poll question for you in our audience. All right, I've got the poll question here on the screen. That is, what's your time frame for adding new or refreshing existing data protection and disaster recovery solutions? Go ahead and just select the time frame for what you're planning for your organization. We're curious to find out, is this something you're looking to do in the near term, or is it something more in the long term? Obviously, if you're on this event today around data protection, DR and DRaaS, you have some potentially plans for the future, or you're looking to improve your existing data protection technology. And I should point out that I will post the bit.ly link to Ed's slide deck there in the chat or in the questions tab for everyone to click on if you want to check out Ed's presentation. He did have a number of resource links there around disaster recovery and data protection, certifications and resources that you may want to check out. All right, thank you everyone who answered that poll question. It's now time to get started. I'm excited to introduce our first presenter on the MegaCast today. That is Mr. Doug Coe, Product Marketing Director at Cohesity. Doug, are you there?
Hey, yes. Good morning.
Good morning, Doug. Thanks for being on. Take it away.
Yeah, you're welcome. So hi, guys. Good morning, good afternoon to folks on the line, and happy to be here to talk about data protection, DR, and DR as a service. So here at Cohesity, this is something we don't take lightly. We understand in today's world there's many, many threats, right? Both, I think, as Ed mentioned, both natural threats like earthquakes and hurricanes and whatnot to, man-made threats like ransomware and bad people trying to get at your data. So we totally believe in this whole concept of, moving from data protection to disaster recovery, as well as, being able to use your backup data more than an insurance policy to really be able to innovate with that data and leverage that into a cloud environment. So let's get started and talk about some of the ways Cohesity helps, and what are some things people are seeing today. So one of the things that you guys are probably thinking about or doing already is really implementing your cloud strategy, right? Now, the interesting thing about that is no matter what cloud strategy or deployment model you choose, and many of you guys are probably doing multiple of these at the same time, is whether it's being cloud first, implementing SaaS applications, to going hybrid cloud or multi-cloud, there's really a whole set of challenges that you introduce to your data. Whether it be different data formats between on-prem and cloud or different cloud providers, whether it be different SLAs or inflexible SLAs, to the shared responsibility model in the cloud, to data transfer and whatnot, to ultimately different data silos. This makes it very challenging for you to manage your data across your hybrid or multi-cloud environment, and this really leads to a problem, what we call mass data fragmentation, which is the proliferation of these silos and the inability to manage your data, and ultimately leads you to potential risks of compromising or losing your data. So where do you really want to get to, right? And when I talk to lots of customers, it's really around how can you get a single solution or platform to manage the whole cycle of data protection and backup, to disaster recovery, and in today's age, not just recovery, but maybe potential migrations and data mobility in a multi-cloud, hybrid cloud world, and ultimately, again, extending your data to not just be an insurance policy, as I mentioned, to being able to innovate and leverage that data for a business advantage. So what does Cohesity bring to the table from, again, a backup DR and the cloud perspective? So, Cohesity provides a software solution that's cloud native and globally efficient, and we'll talk about how that is implemented. And we are also a single platform that you can run on-prem, protect your cloud workloads, including your SaaS applications, to, again, a multi-cloud, hybrid cloud environment, and allowing you to do that and provide universal protection across all those different workloads and use cases. And we're a platform that's really designed, with the recent architectures to allow you to reduce your management overhead and ultimately allow your team to support and leverage your data for innovation. So let's talk a little bit about the platform itself. The software is a software-defined platform, so you can run on any cloud or any hardware. So whether you're deploying it on AWS or Azure, or whether you're deploying on x86 hardware, such as from our partners like HPE or Cisco, it doesn't really matter, right? It's the same hardware platform and simple to manage. It's cloud native, meaning if you're going from on-prem to the cloud, right, you don't need to leverage, or you don't need any additional hardware or software such as cloud gateways, right? Use native integration to move data to the public cloud, or it runs directly on the public cloud itself. Now, what's very important to some of our larger customers, and again, I'll point this out, for any type of backup solution, you should really look at the back end, right, and some of the plumbing that's associated with that, because in today's day and age, with data growing at a rapid pace, you're going to need something that's web scale, that could scale to potentially multiple petabytes and provide you with the performance you need to both back up your data quickly so you can meet your backup windows. Because again, there's still only 24 hours in the day, but the data sets continue to grow. And of course, quickly recover in the case of a disaster or a malicious attack. Of course, for security, your data needs to be encrypted, both at rest and in flight. It doesn't really matter, right? In today's day and age, both on-prem and the cloud, and the platform itself needs to provide hooks and balances to ensure that the data can't be compromised even after it's been backed up, especially in the case of ransomware. And then, as I mentioned, it needs to be super efficient, right? With both the data volumes, right, you need to have efficient dedupe but not just dedupe itself, but at a global scale. So being able to dedupe across different applications and across different workloads, and really minimize the data storage that you need, both to store on-prem and in the cloud to reduce your storage costs. But again, in a multi-cloud, hybrid cloud environment, you also want to reduce the data transfer costs. So you want to be able to do incrementals, you want to be able to do only change blocks, and do that, again, in a super efficient manner to reduce those costs as well. And again, a unique capability with Cohesi is we built our platform to be highly indexed and searchable. So, again, in the case of multi-cloud, hybrid cloud, multi-region cloud deployment, so even if you're in the same cloud provider and you're deploying across regions, right, it's difficult to actually find the data you need. And we provide this capability with global search. So you can, again, find the data you need and recover from it very quickly. So, how do we deliver this? As a single platform across hybrid and multi-cloud, we truly enable data mobility, right, across your hybrid and multi-cloud environment, and ultimately allowing you to back up anything and recover anywhere. So let's double-click and look at some of our key backup capabilities. So many of our customers today, right, they start backup from their legacy on-premises environment, right? And this has been an ongoing investment, and they need to back that up today or continue to modernize and update their backup environment. And there are several ways they leverage this to move to the cloud. One is through long-term retention and archiving, right? So the ability to take your on-prem backups and then move a copy into the public cloud itself and leverage cloud storage such as S3, Glacier, Azure Blobs, or Google Cloud Storage, right? And that's super important for a lot of customers. Another interesting capability we leverage and we provide is file archiving. So again, a lot of the data sets today that are moving to the cloud are your unstructured data, like your files and your objects. So we allow this capability to directly archive data from your primary storage device, such as your Dell EMC Isilon or Per FlashBlade, and move that directly to the cloud. And again, that allows you to both reduce costs from your on-premises footprint, free up some space for some of your production environments or production apps, but also make it searchable and usable in the cloud as well too. So you could actually run analytics across these file sets, and of course migrate it back as you need be back on premises if you need. Also, we provide storage tiering, right? So again, if you have primary storage on-prem, we can tier that onto Cohesity, providing you with a lower cost alternative, and then tier that again into cloud storage, and then automatically move that between tiers with policy-based thresholds. So that's one use case, right? That's on-prem and on-prem to cloud, right, or hybrid cloud. Other use cases, again, a lot of your developers, a lot of your users are already moving and using cloud applications, all right, or developing cloud applications. So you need to be able to back up the whole gamut, right, from your infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and software as a service. So with IaaS, right, the ability to back up your Amazon EC2 instances, your Azure VMs, your Google Compute nodes becomes super important. Now, what's cool about Cohesity is we actually provide several different methods to do this to really optimize, again, costs, performance, availability, and again, app consistency and whatnot to really ensure you get the best of both worlds and optimize for your use case. So a lot of flexibility in how you can back up your cloud VMs. For platform services, right, we support things like, as some of the cloud native apps are moving towards platform services and databases as a service, right, we support backups of things like Amazon RDS, right, so you can manage that, and we can back those up and manage the indexing and manage the metadata for those backups as well too. And then again, there's a backup of your SaaS applications, right? So obviously one of the most popular ones is Office 365, and of course if you're using the file sharing, the OneDrive capabilities. So having that able to back up, and again, you got to remember that with all these cloud deployment models, it's a shared responsibility. So it's not the cloud provider's responsibility to back up your data, it's your responsibility. So having these implemented and then having them backed up towards the SLAs that you need, the retention periods, the RTOs, the RPOs, that's what you're going to be able to achieve with a solution like Cohesity. So we talked about backup and data protection, both on-prem to the cloud and in the cloud. Let's talk a little bit about disaster recovery. So I think, Ed hit upon some of the DR challenges, and I'll reiterate some of them. A lot of it is a long, strenuous manual process, right? And the larger environment, if it's a mix of Windows, Linux, VMware, and your different platforms, right? Again, it just makes it more complex and ultimately error-prone, right? That's a situation where it's going to be difficult for you to actually do DR and do DR testing without any errors or failures. Now, as we talked about moving toward DR as a service, as Ed mentioned, right? Then you got to think about incompatibility across clouds and across on-prem and cloud, right? Well, on-prem you're probably running VMware Hyper-V. In the cloud, it's Amazon AMIs or Azure VHDs, right? So they're different formats, and you need to figure out how do you get those to work together. That ultimately makes things difficult to move. Again, a lot of failures occur, right? We have research showing that up to 34% of people have had a failure in terms of their failover to the cloud, which is very high. And ultimately, a lot of customers end up deploying multiple point solutions, right? A solution for backup, a solution for cloud DR, a different solution for failover, a different solution for cloud and on-prem. And again, that just adds to that complexity and, again, that problem of mass data fragmentation that I talked about. So how do we cohesively address disaster recovery? Again, there's really multiple ways you could do it, and we provide, again, lots of flexibility for our customers. The first is really just an extension of the cloud archive capability I talked about earlier, right? You're taking your backup data, you're archiving it into cloud storage such as S3. Now we've added the capability where you could actually rebuild your entire environment, right, from that archive data, which is pretty cool. You can rebuild that, create a cluster, spin up those VMs, convert them, and get it up and running, right? Now, the challenge is that is it's super low cost because you're just leveraging your archive data, right, that's being stored in S3 Glacier. But again, depending on where you stored it, it's going to take a while to recover that, typically days. Another option we have is with our Cloud Spin solution, and that has the capability based on policies or based on, again, on-demand trigger to take a VM from on-premises or take VMs from on-premises and copy them over to the cloud, convert them into the right cloud format, and then spin up that VM in the cloud or those VMs in the cloud. So that allows you to, again, move through that process a little bit more quickly and potentially allow some of our customers to have recovery times into the hours. And for the most mission-critical environments where you really need to get up and running very quickly in the order of minutes, right? So our customers are running our entire data platform on their cloud providers of choice. This allows us to sync the data from on-prem to cloud, right, and move that very quickly, and again, allow you to spin up, convert, and fail over to the cloud instances if you do have a disaster from your on-premises workloads. So that's super cool and important, right? Moving the data, spinning up the VMs, turning them on, converting the VMs, spinning them up, and turning them on is very important. However, as I alluded to earlier, right, there are still challenges around the manual processes involved with this. And again, because of that, we introduced the Helios Runbook application. And what Runbook is, it's an automation and orchestration tool that allows you to, number one, quickly design your automation and your disaster recovery workflows. That means you could pick the VMs you want, order them the way it's supposed to be sequenced to boot up and load, insert any timings or dependencies, right? So it could be a script, it could be, again, a different configuration that you want to spin up in the cloud, and then design that through a visual interface. So again, you can see that workflow very easily rather than looking through paper or a step-by-step checklist. Now, once you've designed your workflow, you can actually validate your workflow as well, too. So this allows you to, again, see if there are any potential red flags, see if there might be a change in the network configuration as you're spinning up to the cloud, or a change in the VMs that you're protecting, right? And that will help you validate to ensure that you won't run into any failures. And the last step is, obviously you've designed and you validated your runbook and your workflow. Now you want to actually execute it, right? So again, for DR testing, right, you want to be able to actually execute the bring up of those machines and those VMs with the right configurations and scripts and spin them up, right? So we could do all those three steps: design, validate, and execute. So what does that help you with? Well, it helps you streamline those complex tasks associated with developing a DR plan and a DR workflow and a DR runbook. Again, it's simple and a visual interface, so you can quickly design those workflows. It's drag and drop, and you design things in minutes and insert the right dependencies and scripts. And it allows you to encapsulate the best practices, right? You want to ensure that each time you do a failover or a test that it's going to work. You capture that, right, and you could test against that, right? You could validate it against any changes in your environment that may potentially put a roadblock the next time you do a failover or a DR test. So that's DR. So, the last part of it, as I mentioned, is really how can you simplify your whole data management experience, again, in a multi-cloud, hybrid cloud world, and how can you better leverage your data from taking it from an insurance policy to allowing you to leverage it for innovation. So let's just talk through some of these. We have, for the first part, we have our Helios global management platform, which is, again, a SaaS offering that allows you to manage all your data deployed across, again, all the different cloud providers across your on-premises data centers and edge locations, and give you that single pane of glass, right, with global visibility management, global search, all those things. So it really simplifies your data management experience and your capacity planning. And then I mentioned the Runbook that, again, helps you automate a lot of the data management and DR processes and orchestrates the whole workflow and executes that workflow. So, again, simplifying the management process. And then providing different APIs, toolkits to enable your developers, your analytics people to really make use of your data and unlock insights and develop new apps. So let's just talk about some of those use cases for innovation, right? These are some things that we're seeing our customers are leveraging us to do more with their data and to innovate. And that is really around, first is around our Smart Files capability. So this is the cool capability, again, beyond backup, we can actually serve up files, right, in the native file formats, right, whether it be NFS, whether it be SMB, or S3. So what's cool about that is this is a multi-protocol in the cloud or on-prem file services that you could potentially run your Linux clients and your Windows clients and your cloud apps all on the same platform, and it interchange that data. So if you write through a Linux client through NFS, you could read it back out through S3 with your cloud app, which is super, super cool. The next one is around dev and test. So this is enabling data copies for your developers and your QA people. So what's very cool about this is you could take potentially a production environment, right, that again is off limits for your developers, but then create zero-cost clones of that data and spin up multiple copies of that at no additional costs because, again, they're really just pointers to the original data, and allow your developers to develop and allow your test and QA people to test against those data sets and leverage that through API automation. And then, the last aspect, which is, again, very unique to the Cohesity platform, is the concept of bringing apps to the data. And what do we mean by this? So we have a marketplace of different apps. These apps can run and gain access to the backup data that's stored and consolidated on Cohesity and start using and leveraging that data. So whether it be, again, your analytics apps such as Splunk, right, where it could go and analyze that data, where it be antivirus software, it could scan your backup data for any viruses, whether it be for ransomware and detect ransomware, or vulnerability checks to detect vulnerability within your data sets. All that data is already there, so you don't need to move that data around to the different applications, right? Instead, you just run those apps directly on our platform, and again, leverage it for different use cases around analytics, security, or dev and test. So with that, I'll just like to summarize, with, again, Cohesi, we're really here to help you with your data management and your cloud journey, from data protection and backup to DR as a service, to ultimately, again, changing the game from, turning your backup data from an insurance policy to a vehicle for innovation. So as a cloud-native platform, we deliver global efficiency. We're a single platform that runs across multi-cloud, hybrid cloud, across the different environments and across the different workloads, from your legacy VMware and Oracle to your cloud-native apps and SaaS applications. Again, a simplified way to manage all your data sets, right? So you can, again, ultimately leverage your data, provide visibility into your data to enable innovation with your developers and enable innovation with your analytics and data scientists. So with that, that's the end of my presentation, and looking forward to seeing some questions that have popped up here on the Q&A.
Yeah, absolutely. Great presentation, Doug. Let's do some Q&A now. We got some good questions coming in. While we do that, I'm just going to bring up this poll. The poll for the audience I want to call your attention to is in the slides window there, and it just says what additional information would you like about the Cohesity solution? And this is a multi-select, question, so feel free to select multiple answers there. All right, let's see. First question, Doug. David is asking, can you send copies of the data to multiple clouds at the same time?
That's a good question. So, in terms of our archive policies, right, you could definitely create different policies for your data sets. So you create a separate policy to archive to one cloud provider and a different policy to archive to another cloud provider. So the short answer is yes. And then on top of that, right, I also mentioned running our data platform, in the cloud. So again, that runs across all the major cloud providers, AWS, Azure, GCP. So again, from that perspective, you could also replicate data to multiple cloud providers as well.
Excellent, excellent. Great flexibility there. Let's see, another question Angie is asking, or she says, first, not all snapshots and clones are created equal. Does this solution have native data protection that works across heterogeneous systems?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I totally understand the point around snapshots and clones are not all created equal. And again, I come from, I work for on-prem storage companies as well, where we talk about snapshots, copy on write, redirect on write, working with various different vendors with that type of technology, and that type of technology also varies by the cloud provider and how the cloud provider implements those technologies. What I'll say is with Cohesi, foundationally, we're built on top of a scale-out file system with basically a highly efficient search tree architecture and pointer architecture without getting too far down in the weeds. So it is highly efficient, super fast to spin up the clones. So they are zero copy, zero footprint. They are really pointers to the original data, and you can spin up dozens or hundreds of clones in a matter of seconds. How does that apply to a heterogeneous system? I think what she might be alluding to is heterogeneous hardware if you're on-prem, and if you're leveraging snapshots of those hardware providers. That's how I interpret that. And my answer to that is we do support snapshots for most of the major hardware vendors as well too, and that allows us to manage those snapshots or ingest data into Cohesi for backup. So again, we could deep dive to understand which storage platforms you might be using on-prem, and we could talk about the snapshot integration offline.
Okay, great answer. Another question here, John is asking, does Helios have two-factor authentication?
That's a good question. I will need to double check on that. I do not believe so, but it is, we do have ways to integrate to different authentication vehicles. So, but yes, let me take that back and get back to John.
Have you worked with any of those vendors in the past?
Not with them, but I know people at all of them.
Another question here coming in. Brian is asking, how does licensing work with Cohesity?
Yes, no, that's a great question. So, with licensing, the primary licensing vehicle is a software subscription, and it is based on the amount of data protected, right? So the capacity of data protected. That's the main licensing that we do with our software.
Okay. Nice. Based on data protected. I like that. Let's see, another question. Lots of good questions coming in. Aaron is asking, can Cohesity do any sort of data throttling or shaping? I'm assuming when the data is being synchronized to other locations.
Yes, that's a great answer. I know there are some controls for how we use the network. So there's definitely some things around there. Again, in terms of what level of shaping and controls you need, I'll have to get back to them on the specifics. But I do know there is some controls on how you use the network. So you don't flood your network from the data transfers.
Awesome. All right. Steven's asking. He says, I'm sure that Cohesity will scale up to anything I might need. What's your minimum data sweet spot? Like, what's the entry point typically with Cohesity?
Yeah, that's another good question. I would say that, our smaller customers start in the order of, tens of terabytes, right? Like around 10, 20, right? That's probably where, some of our smaller customers start. But yeah, we definitely have customers that scale out to hundreds to, petabytes or more.
Okay, nice. And then Jeremy's asking, well, first he said they're in a unique situation. They have data that can't leave certain locales. They need to be able to manage all the backup locations. So we have to be able to see them all, but have certain data backed up to the U.S. cloud targets and data from other countries backed up to separate cloud targets. Is that something that Cohesity might be able to help with?
Yeah, so, based on, again, all our data backup, archiving is policy driven, right? So you could create policies for, again, multiple cloud accounts and multiple cloud regions, right? So you could create a policy for U.S. data centers, right? So again, U.S. West, U.S. East, U.S. Central, and then apply that to only specific data sets that you're backing up and archiving. And you could do the same for other data sets to European or Asia Pac data centers as well too. So again, our software supports, all the APIs are deployed across the different cloud locations, and we support all the different cloud locations. So with those policies, you can define where you want your data to go.
Excellent. Well, there's still more questions coming in, Doug. I put those there in your folder for you to review because we've run out of time for our live Q&A. But great presentation. Thank you so much for being on the event today.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you to Cohesity for supporting the event today. And now it's time for our first gift card prize announcement. That's going to Daniel Zumbaris from Michigan. Congratulations, Daniel Zumbaris from Michigan. We will reach out to you to deliver your prize. And now I'm excited to introduce our next presenter on today's MegaCast. That is Stephen Manley, Chief Technologist at Dhruva. Stephen, are you there?
I'm here. How you doing?
Doing great. Thank you for being on. Take it away.
All right. So imagine, if you will, everybody, that it's a lovely day. You're in France, and sun's shining, and you're swimming in a beautiful lake, and nothing could be better. Till you realize the lake is made of yogurt. And actually, you work in a manufacturing facility, and you had a server go out, and you didn't really have a DR solution, so you sort of Frankenstein something together by spinning up a new server, restoring parts of old backups, and not surprisingly, when you put it into production, the manufacturing line went haywire, and you had a facility flooded with yogurt. This actually happened a few years ago to a French manufacturer. If you don't take disaster recovery seriously, you may find yourself swimming in a lake of yogurt. So At Dhruva, one of the things we think a lot about is disaster recovery. And why do you need to worry about disaster recovery? So there's the usual things that we're all familiar with. Natural disasters happen, terrible events happen, but there's a new wave of threats that you have to be worried about. It's not just servers failing anymore. It's things like ransomware. People deliberately attacking you to bring you down, to extort upwards of $40 million from you if you're Norsk Hydro, to keep your facility running. And if you don't have a disaster recovery solution in place, you have to pay. Or in other cases, it's as we once met somebody from Arizona, they said basically, we got hit with a pickaxe problem. And we weren't sure if that was a virus or some sort of malware, but it turns out it was a disgruntled employee who took out a rack of servers and storage with a pickaxe. And they weren't set up to do a rapid recovery. So no matter how you look at where the environment is going now, whether it's traditional disasters, it's external attacks like ransomware, it's governance that requires disaster recovery to be set up, or it's disgruntled internal employees taking advantage of what is an antiquated disaster recovery infrastructure. If you're not thinking about disaster recovery, you might be missing something. Now, as these threats evolve, the challenge you've got is it's not as if the business is standing still and saying, all right, just go solve disaster recovery, we'll put everything else on hold while you do it. They're expecting all of IT to be changing, as you face these new threats. So, for example, I only want to pay for what I use. Well, that's a real challenge to solve in and of itself, especially if you're thinking disaster recovery and usually you've got some sort of standby. That's not great. I want to evolve my IT so I can have more self-service. Okay, well now you've got a lot of people spinning up a lot of things. How are you going to make sure that there's a disaster recovery plan in place for everything that people are spinning up on their own? And of course, I've got sites all over the world subject to different regulations. So I need you to oversee that, but you can't centralize your disaster recovery infrastructure because a lot of the data can't leave these locations. So we've got all new threats, plus we've got new business requirements that makes it even harder to deal with those threats. And if that weren't enough, just to put some sort of data behind the theory, what most people say is, look, one of my biggest challenges is data growth. Well, data growth breaks traditional disaster recovery. So you're saying, I don't want to have standby servers because I don't want to pay for twice the data growth. But if I'm going to have to fully recover my data as if it were coming from a backup, whether it's tape or disk or wherever you're storing it, wow, that's a long time to bring that back up because it's more and more data. And by the way, it's not like all my data is going to be sitting in my data center anymore. I expect you to not only be able to manage disaster recovery in the environment, but again, over half my spending is going to be in the public cloud, which means over half my applications are going to be running in the public cloud, which means I expect your disaster recovery to not just cover what I'm running today, but to cover what I'm going to be running in the future. And of course, because I don't want to pay for standby, as you can see, everybody's planning on closing data centers. And not surprisingly, what we see across the industry is the first set of data centers they close are the disaster recovery sites. So again, you've got new disaster threats, plus heightened expectations from the business, with an IT infrastructure that's changing dramatically underneath you. So how are you going to solve disasters and deal with disaster recovery in that environment? And why is this so complicated? And the why is pretty easy. It's that everything's changing underneath you. So if you think about traditional technology, we're good at dealing with shifts in technology. From hard drives to flash, from tape to disk, whatever those low-level technology shifts are, the industry tends to be able to adopt quickly. And maybe you get a couple of new vendors, but for the most part, the way you run your job, the way you run your data center is the same. The shift that really turns everything on its head is when the consumption model changes. When people start expecting things to be on demand. And you shift from the model of, I pay for equipment, the equipment is mine, and I do with it what I want, to, no, I'm only going to pay for what I use. I'm going to deploy dynamically. So the reason everything is changing underneath you is that, in fact, everything is changing underneath you because the business requirements, the consumption model, is changing at the same time that the underlying technology is changing. So you've got to face these new disaster recovery threats, but you can't just do it by working a little bit harder or getting a slightly newer piece of technology or just wanting it that little bit more. You've got to really rethink how you're approaching it. And that's why people are going to SaaS. And we see SaaS going across the IT infrastructure. This isn't just a disaster recovery thing. You see SaaS in the applications, the development tools, databases, infrastructure, across the board. And the number one reason everyone goes to SaaS is it solves what are now really commodity problems, places that you're not differentiating. And it lets you focus on connecting into the business to solve what the business's problems are. So SaaS is really the wave of the future. Now, what does SaaS mean, though, in the context of data protection? So if someone comes to you and says, well, I've got a SaaS solution, what do you look for to make sure that you're actually getting something that's going to take that burden off you so that you can work on adding more value to the business? And you can really think of it as three things, and it really ties back again to what those business requirements were for IT. The first thing is it's got to be able to scale up and down. You know, if you're constantly over-provisioned or under-provisioned because you're trying to provision for peaks and guessing at what your maximum load is, you don't have SaaS. It's got to be able to scale with you so you're only paying for what you use. Again, that's what the business expects. And by the way, that doesn't just apply to your backups or your security. It's got to apply to disaster recovery. You should really only be paying for your disaster recovery infrastructure when you're using your disaster recovery infrastructure. The second piece is, if you're spending a whole lot of time managing it, it's not freeing you up to add value to your business. So things like installation, maintenance, upgrades, those should be things of the past. You shouldn't be doing that if you have a SaaS solution. That's the whole point of buying a SaaS solution, is it takes care of it for you. And then the last part is, once you've got it in place, because as we see, the business requirements keep evolving. There's new types of disaster threats. There's new types of regulations. There's new expectations from the business. A SaaS solution should be able to extend the value that you're getting from the solution without you having to install new software or configure a whole separate thing. It should just be able to add as you go along. It should evolve with the infrastructure automatically. Now, if you have that SaaS infrastructure, again, now you've taken disaster recovery from, wow, how am I going to deal with the scale? How am I going to deal with these different threats? To, well, no, now I've got disaster recovery separate from the rest of my environment. I'm only going to pay for it when I'm using it. And I'm not spending a lot of time managing it because it's taking care of it for me. It really starts to tick those boxes of how do you deal with the evolving threats and how do you deal with the expectations of the business. And so then the real obvious question that we get from most people is, okay, I get it, that's great, but why now? Why should I do this now? What's the big forcing function? And as we talk about SaaS, the threats have gone SaaS. So ransomware, again, we started with the attack on Norsk Hydro costing them $40 million, but ransomware attacks are up across the board. Ransomware has gone SaaS. You don't need to be a deeply intelligent hacker anymore. You don't need to have years of computer science expertise to figure out how to do ransomware. It comes as a SaaS kit. So the only way you're going to fight the SaaS that's attacking you in the form of ransomware is your own better form of SaaS to be able to keep up and evolve so that you're keeping up with the hackers. And it's important to do this now. One, those SaaS ransomware attacks are out there. The big payments are out there. But even if you don't get hit with the big payment, even if you're not a huge target like some of these companies are, the research shows that if you're attacked by ransomware and you're not back up and running and fully operational in 5 days, 90% of those companies fail within a year. 5 days, if you're not up in 5 days, 90% of the companies will be dead within a year. The average ransomware attack right now takes 7+ days to recover from. Therefore, if you do not have a disaster recovery plan in place for a ransomware attack, there is a good chance that you will be out of business within a year. That is a threat to your business. And just as importantly, if you're not dealing with these ransomware threats in a SaaS manner, if you're not taking care of it, it's a threat to your career. Because as IT is evolving, the jobs of I do disaster recovery, I do storage, I do backup, those jobs are getting consolidated into versatilists. And the value in the stack is moving up towards data science, towards understanding how to deal with regulations, again, connecting with the business. So if you're spending your time custom building disaster recovery solutions, the problem is you're on the wrong side of the trends of the market. So if you don't go SaaS for disaster recovery now, your company's at threat from ransomware and other attacks, but your career's at threat in terms of you need to be evolving so you have a place to end up. So let's look at the positive side, though. So if you start to look at using disaster recovery as a service, the positive side is you get to ride the evolution of where data protection is going, which is away from my replica updated, or I've got a standby facility, or I run a disaster recovery test every 6 months, or I do backups, to much more of a business-centric role where I help keep the business up and running. I'm part of that planning process. I'm part of our cyber resiliency effort. I'm getting that data available so we could do analytics. Because one of the best ways to test a disaster recovery, of course, is to spin up the environment. Well, if you're spinning up the environment, maybe you could do interesting things with it. And so this lets you transition from I'm running as fast as I can just to try to keep up with all the change to I'm now riding the wave of change and it's taking me to where I want to be. So why disaster recovery? Because bad things happen and data is more important to business than ever. Why SaaS? Because it's the only way you're going to be able to scale and meet the needs. Why do it now? Because both from a career perspective and in terms of the threats, you need to be taking action because your business and your career are at risk. And so finally, why Dhruva? Why us? So the first part here is, of course, Dhruva is sort of the original SaaS platform for data protection. And as you look at your disaster recovery environment, one of the questions you want to ask yourself is, am I going to be able to cover everything? Like we said, over half of applications are going to be moving to cloud. You've got distributed environments with endpoints, with data centers, and with things running in cloud. You're going to want something that can scale across all those workloads. And as we talked about, you're going to want something that can start with backup, extend to disaster recovery, help you bring value and compliance, and then even into data analytics. So Dhruva brings all your data together and allows you to extract all the different types of value. And again, you can start in whichever zone you want, add whichever type of value you want, and then grow from there. That's the beauty of SaaS. You can extend as you need to extend. There's no new installation. There's no new things to buy. It just automatically works. And what does it look like? Effectively, again, you can think of if you're doing your on-premises to cloud disaster recovery and data protection, you have all your different workloads on premises. We will bring your data to cloud and store it for you in the most cost-efficient manner possible. And again, if something goes wrong, you can then, on demand, spin up an environment to do disaster recovery. This is not something that you need to have a standby data center running. You don't need standby resources being consumed. That's the beauty of cloud. If you need something, you'll be able to get it on demand when you need it. And we can do that with your data for disaster recovery. So you're always storing your backups. You may be storing them for a short period of time. You may be storing them for long-term retention. But when the disaster hits, then and only then do you start to spin up the infrastructure. Now, of course, as I said before, a best practice would be you'd really like to do some disaster recovery testing. And the great part, again, is you can spin that disaster recovery test up and then release the resources. And you're not affecting the production environment. You're not affecting your backup environment. It's something you can do totally separately to make sure you're comfortable, to train up your team. Hey, again, maybe you're going to run some analytics once you've got the environment running. And then you can make it all go away. And that's the beauty of going into a SaaS-based cloud solution, Dynamically spin up, dynamically spin down, you can do what you want. But of course, as we said, you're going to have apps that aren't just running on premises. You're going to have some applications running on EC2 instances using Amazon RDS databases or Redshift. You're going to have more applications running in the cloud. With Dhruva's cloud native protection, you can also back up and you do disaster recovery, not just for the data, but for that entire environment across multiple accounts. As your footprint in the cloud grows, you're going to have more and more accounts, whether it's across business units, groups, companies you acquire. The ability to do disaster recovery for your on-premises environment to cloud is great, but you can also now do disaster recovery for your cloud-native environment. Because just like things go wrong in your environment, things are going to go wrong in the cloud as well. There's still bad actors, there's still ransomware, bad things still happen. So we cover you across the board. But don't take my word for it. Look at a couple of customers. So for example, Andritz. Now they're in manufacturing, and right now manufacturers are in fact one of the biggest targets for ransomware because lots of facilities, and obviously if those facilities are down, it hits the bottom line. So Andritz basically looked and said they were very manual, again, just like we talked about, just running as fast as they could to try to keep up with their backup environment. By transitioning to Dhruva SAS, not only did they solve their backup challenges, but it opens them up to be able to do efficient, simple disaster recovery for offices around the world for all different types of data. Another example, Egan, again, also in that manufacturing space, again, one of the most threatened areas right now. Same sort of thing, 100% virtualized, but they were spending a lot of time on their backup. So backup was really their long pole in their environment. Everything else spun up quickly. Everything was simple, that new IT they were looking for. And so by shifting again to a SaaS backup solution, they save time so that they can invest in other things, and it sets them up for disaster recovery, for analytics, everything that they're going to want to extend beyond that. So again, it wasn't just about saving money for them, though that was clearly a win, but it was also about increasing their productivity and freeing them up to bring more value to the business. Now, outside the manufacturing space, let's look at something more in sort of the health pharma space. You can see that a company like Regeneron, as they started to look at disaster recovery as a service, they looked at data protection and they said, this is a win, just straight backup. Now, again, we can just extend this into disaster recovery. All right, now it's an even bigger win. Well, okay, now we're going to look at disaster recovery plus backup plus long-term retention of backups, an even bigger win. And again, the great part with this is the solution with them grew as the SaaS backend expanded. So it wasn't buy new products, install new products, manage new products. You get these advantages as you go along because you're riding the SaaS wave. And again, over time, the TCO gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and they're able to solve the business problems they have without having to invest a lot of energy and time on their end. So again, tying back to what are you looking for in SaaS? You want to be able to ride the cloud. You're riding this wave. So your cost savings should come with you. As cloud gets cheaper, your solution should get cheaper. As cloud offers new opportunities to be able to add value, you should be able to get those that add value. Second, it better be easy to deploy. Right? Again, the whole reason you're buying a solution here is if you had time to do custom disaster recovery, custom backup, custom analytics, custom, you don't have that time. So you need something that's easy to install and just works. And that's that last part is just because it's easy to install, it better be easy to administer on a day-to-day basis, including those extended features. Because if you can't bring that to the table, again, you can't grow and solve the business problems you have as your business evolves. So why Dhruva? Dhruva solves those problems for you, sets you up to be successful. And so, as we close this out, again, the great part of being a SaaS company is it's really easy for you to look, get a demo, do a trial, and then assess whether you think that what I've said is true or not. Because the biggest thing in a SaaS environment is I'm not going to send you a box. There's nothing physically you're installing. You're not waiting for some sort of gear to show up. We'll get you up and running in 15 minutes or less to be able to test out the solution. You can test out the backup. You can test out the disaster recovery. You can test out the the governance, and you can see, is this the solution for me? Either way, it's only 15 minutes. You should at least try it to see what you might be missing. Because otherwise, you may find yourself swimming in a lake of yogurt. And while that sounds really cool, I think in the end it's not nearly as fun as you think it might be. So with that, thank you, and I'll open for questions.
Great presentation, Stephen. Really love the storytelling there. I like that analogy. While we do some Q&A, I'm just going to bring up this poll question for the audience. It says, what additional information would you like about the Dhruva solution? So let's see, first question that came in, they're asking about what's the biggest challenge for a company looking to adopt DRaaS, in your opinion?
So I think for us, from what we've seen, it's that if you're going to do DRaaS, you do need to have at least a footprint in the cloud, because obviously, let's say you're running as an on-premises environment and you're doing your backup to the cloud and setting up for DRaaS. When the disaster happens, we can very quickly recover you into your own, sort of VPC, your own area in the cloud. But you need to have set up that area so that the networking on premises, you can actually connect up to it, because there's no point in having applications running in the cloud that you can't connect to. You're going to need to make sure your security's set up. And again, you're really going to want to have tested it, because you're going to want to make sure you fail over the whole application to the cloud, because the last thing you want is either key parts of the application were left on premises and thus didn't get recovered, or even if that part's still running on premises, you don't want to be bouncing a lot of traffic back and forth if you can avoid it. And so what we tell people is, let's make sure you've got a cloud environment set up, and then let's do some, again, disaster recovery tests. Again, the tests are inexpensive. Let's make sure that everything flows the way you think, so that when it comes time to hit the big red button, whoever's hitting it on your staff is comfortable with it and they know it's going to work. So that's the biggest thing is, if you've never done anything in cloud, DRaaS can be very scary. You're really going to want to be able to have that set up a little bit.
Yeah, great advice, and I think this question is kind of along the same lines, and how can I get confident that shifting to DRaaS will actually work when I need it to work?
Yeah, I mean, it's test. Over my years, I always found it fascinating, the number of customers I would meet that, again, they do maybe twice a year, if they were lucky, disaster recovery tests between, let's say, two data centers. And the conversation always went something to the effect of, well, no, it was a really great test because we found these 6 things that didn't actually work right, and we went and fixed them. And the next obvious question was, okay, and then you reran the test to make sure it worked. Well, no, we don't get another window for another 6 months. And you just look at it and say, so you fixed the 6 things that you hit first, but you don't really know if it's going to work because you didn't hit the problems that would have come after it. And so I can't emphasize enough how important disaster recovery testing is, because, again, when your disaster happens, it's often going to be the worst time of day when you have your least experienced staff present, and you're going to want everybody to be super comfortable that this is just something they can do. And that's why we really encourage people that when they think of disaster recovery testing, don't just, hey, it came up. Again, this is that good spot to leverage analytics or some other use case. If you can put those applications to work, just to do something, it really convinces you that you don't just have a VM spun up, but you actually are getting water through the pipes and it's functioning the way you expect. And so, testing is much easier now than it's ever been because cloud is so dynamic and easy to spin up. But if you don't take advantage of that, then again, you're still kind of working on a hope and a prayer. And you'd really prefer not to have your disaster recovery depend on hopes and prayers if you can avoid it.
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely, yeah. Cloud testing makes things just so much easier, but you have to leverage it. And you say test because you don't want to just do it once. You want to do it, multiple times until it works. Another question here, Robert is asking, what's the cost based on agents or storage that's used?
Yeah, so for us, usually the way we charge, it based on kind of the data that we're backing up. So, for example, if it's VMs or those sorts of things, then it's by data. If you're looking at more, say, the disaster recovery or the recovery backup analytics on endpoints or SaaS applications like Office 365, there we charge by device or by seat. And then for the cloud native, again, that tends to be less on the amount of data and again more on the number of objects. So what we try to do is charge kind of the way you're paying. You buy Office 365 by seats, we charge you by protecting those seats. For your traditional data center, virtual machine backups, SQL, all that kind of stuff, we try to charge you there by capacity because that's how you're used to paying. So it does vary a little bit by data set. We try to lower the impedance mismatch so that you're paying the way you're used to paying for the actual production product.
Got it. Okay. And then probably the last question I think we have time for here in our Q&A session is, how fast can I recover from a disaster?
Yeah, so that's one of the beautiful things about cloud actually is in most cases we can get you spun up and running in a 15 to 20 minute time period, right? Because the beautiful thing is, given that your data is already in the cloud with Dhruva, being able to quickly rehydrate into another part of the cloud, into your VPC in the cloud, that's a really high bandwidth connection that we can just pump the data in and get you up and running very quickly. And so it's a really nice feature to be able to get you up. So this is not let's wait 3 hours, 4 hours. You're up and running pretty darn quickly. In fact, what we find with most people is the decision whether to trigger the disaster recovery takes much longer than the actual disaster recovery itself takes.
Absolutely, yeah. Cool. All right. Well, I put one more question for you there in the queue that we didn't have time for. But, Stephen, it's been great having you on the event today. Thank you so much.
All right. Appreciate it. Have a great day, everybody.
For more information on the Dhruva solution, visit Dhruva.com and give the solution a try for yourself. Also, don't forget about the Handouts tab. We've got information there from each of the presenters, including Dhruva. Their paper is entitled, What is Cloud-Based Backup and Recovery? You can learn about it in more detail with that handout. And now it's time for our next Amazon $500 gift card winner. We have an Amazon $500 gift card, and that's going out to Mitchell LaPlume from Massachusetts. Congratulations, Mitchell LaPlume from Massachusetts. After the next presentation and each of the subsequent presentations, we'll be announcing a gift card winner as well as a grand prize, so make sure you stay tuned for those. And now I'm excited to introduce our next presenter on today's MegaCast. Welcome, Steve Siegel, Head of Product Marketing at Clumio. Steve, are you there?
I am here. Pleased to be here. My name is Steve Siegel. I'm Head of Product Marketing here at Clumio. And I'm going to take you through how Clumio addresses data protection in the cloud today. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Again, Steve Siegel. I'm going to talk to you about simple, secure, and scalable, the authentic data protection service that you really deserve. So let's get into it. Okay, so if you look at it today, cloud tech really has been around for quite a long time, the last several decades, and it's certainly very prevalent within the data center. But what you see over time is a new application evolution has really driven data dispersion across clouds. And if you look over time about how this happened, it started probably 20-odd years ago now, hard to believe, but when you started seeing SaaS applications really start to come on the scene. This is when things like Salesforce started, et cetera, and there were these critically important applications, but they were applications that weren't necessarily a core competence or didn't have to be a core competence of the business, and they could take advantage of the cloud, and that became a very preferable model. And then as you move from there, where there were these applications that were a little bit more important to the business, core competencies, and needed to be architected, but then really needed to take advantage of the cloud. That's largely when things like AWS and platform and infrastructure as a service began to take off back 10, 15 years ago. But the interesting thing is that with a lot of the deployments, there's a number of applications that still stay back in the data center for a number of different reasons. Some move to the cloud and then have to move back for cost and economic reasons. But the bottom line is, if you look at it, most customers are in all of these clouds right now. They're in all of these places, and that's why the title of the slide is what it is, which is with regard to data dispersion across these clouds. The data is virtually everywhere. So with that, I'm going to just briefly introduce you to Clumio. We are a secure backup as a service for the enterprise. Basically, we recognize the fact that, as we just talked on the last slide, that data needs to be where the action is. It's where the processing, the analysis, the collection, the AI to analyze data for like driving experiences, other kinds of experience. That's what's driving it everywhere. And it needs to be, we believe that it needs to be a lot easier than it is today from the point of view of being able to go ahead and back up that data. And that's really the mission of Clumio at this particular point, is to focus on data protection in the cloud. The unique different thing that we bring to the table is we are a single secure enterprise backup as a service. We have no hardware to sell. We have no appliances, no infrastructure. There is no design required, and we'll get into the details about that here in just a second. But as we do that, what I wanted to do is just kind of quickly recap the backup evolution that has gone along, over this time period that I talked about with regard to dispersion of data. Originally it was on-prem legacy backup. It was a new application that you had to build, and it had a lot of pieces to it, and along with that came high costs and a lot of complexity, right? That got improved a little bit as SaaS started to become a little bit more popular. There's vendors who do cloud-native endpoint backup, and they got the subscription and the as-a-service right, but from a cloud perspective, often still use cloud resources that were often stored in customer accounts. A lot of that still happens today. And customers started seeing costs and continue to see costs in their cloud bills and egress charges and that kind of thing. And then the next wave after that is what we call the on-prem newer backup. And basically what these are is cases where you have appliances that help. There's integration between hardware and software in hardware appliances and virtualized or cloud appliances, which helps on deployment, but it really doesn't take away fully the issue of complexity around the infrastructure. And then again, to come to Clumio and what we bring to the table being authentic SaaS for enterprise backup, we are 100% built in the cloud. We are 100% as a service. We don't allow our customers to pay for egress charges, no surprise cloud bills, et cetera, and we provide predictable costs. We believe that we really fulfill the promise of the cloud, and I'm going to click down on a few slides after this next section to go into those details. So with that, when you go into it, and this is probably very familiar for many of you, if not most or all of you here, if you look at on-prem legacy backup, the challenge with it is, again, you have all this complexity to deal with, all these pieces you have to manage. And you have to manage not only the upgrades and the testing and the refreshes and all that kind of stuff. As you look at your current environment that I just spoke of a moment ago, you have to replicate this set of stacks for all these pieces, for all your data centers, your remote sites, and then you have to replicate it in some form or fashion across your cloud apps and your SaaS applications. It's really difficult. And as we talked about, I talked about a moment ago, when you talk about on-prem newer backup, the integration of the appliances certainly helps ease the deployment, but you're still worrying about infrastructure. And at the outset, you're not really taking full advantage of the cloud. You're just kind of using it as a tape replacement or an archive tier. The challenge is, again, in this environment, you still have to worry about that replication across environments. And you still have all those different bits and pieces and stacks that you have to worry about, all these dispersed cloud environments. Now, what we're starting to see with some of those vendors is they'll come in with a disaster recovery solution. You'll start to see some level of what we call a spillover backup, where you start to back up a couple of key files and things like that in the cloud. But to start taking advantage of the cloud, a lot of times what they'll do is they say their backup application will run in the cloud, and it will, but it's often done as a lift and shift. And what winds up happening is you have an application that was designed for an on-prem environment running in the cloud. And when that happens, right, you wind up having to run those applications 24/7, which in the public cloud particularly can be very expensive. Right? Some customers we talk to see $8,000 to $10,000 extra per month just for the AWS bill. And that's not an AWS bill that they get directly from the backup vendor. That's their bill, right? And it becomes actually very hard to find and very hard to track, right? And then what you also wind up doing in this environment is, because there's no source side dedupe, all that data is pushed from your on-premise location to the cloud, and that exposes you to challenges from the point of view of managing your bandwidth and also egress charges, particularly when you're doing a restore. And again, even in this environment, you're still managing all that cloud complexity and on-prem infrastructure, et cetera, and you're really not getting the cloud agility that really the promise of the cloud says it should be able to be delivered. You can get performance, but it's at a cost because you're going to be scaling up EC2. Again, if you're running that 24/7, it's a very expensive proposition. So the bottom line is, as we see it, is to really summarize here, is that you've got too many backup models to deal with. Each of these different silos is different. You have to make a different set of design choices, a different set of decisions, and most customers tell us it's basically untenable. And the complexity over time, when you think about it, has really gotten exponentially worse. And that's where Clumio comes in. So again, we're a single secure service. We are built in the cloud. We are built with the latest and most up-to-date microservices. We provide an easy-to-use interface, and what we do along with that is marry that with a business model and a pricing model that's very easy to consume. For VMs that we back up, we price by VM. They can grow larger, they can grow smaller. We basically price by the VM. We don't price on capacity used. We manage that. We manage the economics of that. You don't have to design a system. We take care of that. We provide global compliance, so you have visibility to how your backups and restores are running. We actually, since we're a service, we integrate base level support. So 72% of the tickets that get filed, if there is an issue, let's say a backup blows down because of a network problem or a VM, a lot of times, well, 72% of the time, we file those tickets. And so it's a much more hands-off experience for our customers, and certainly if we find issues that we can handle, we cover them with basically no intervention. And the other piece that I'll go into some detail about a little bit later is always-on security. It is encryption end-to-end. It is always turned on. You literally cannot turn it off. And along with that, we have a set of compliance standards that we are meeting. Things like SOC 2 Type 1, ISO 27001, and actually HIPAA now that we have done our compliance work around. And the net of it ultimately is always on security and our cloud first or security first mindset and strategy is very much to the fore. We worry about that so that our customers can rest easy at night knowing that their data is fully protected. So to get into a little bit more of the specifics here, I'll go into the details and the benefits that we have in supporting VMware and VMware Cloud on AWS. As I mentioned, there's no limits on restores, no egress charges. Everything is included in that flat rate per VM. We provide single centrally managed backup and recovery for all the VMware workloads. You're using the same interface, the same backup policies you can apply to VMs wherever they run. And you can actually, we support data mobility, so you can back up from on-prem and restore to the cloud and vice versa. We were very pleased and delighted to receive a Best of Show award towards the end of last year. But even more importantly, we've got some great customers. So this is Corey Smith, who was one of our early customers. Running a small municipality, their previous backup solution was just, he recognized it wasn't really sufficient for them if they had a disaster, and a lot of state and local governments, if you talk to them, really concerned about data protection and ransomware, that kind of thing. And as well, he had a lean team. He felt he was really spending too much time and resource on backup. He looked at Clumio. He found it was powerful, easy, and affordable. He said, hey, all you got to do is drop in a lightweight VM, an OVA, into the VMware stack and go, and that really is about how simple as it is. And the results is really found that, it's really enabled him and his team to focus on much higher priorities than backup. In his words, we were really the only vendor that stuck out as truly cloud-based. And, in his words again, simple to deploy, easy to configure, very low cost, and it just works. So, we're very proud of that. We're very delighted to see in the success that he is achieving with our product. To get to one of the next workloads, the next workload that we support AWS native services, specifically backing up EBS volumes. And if you get into the details, and I will further in a second, data and security concerns really becomes a problem. A lot of folks, what they do is use snapshot managers, and what you wind up doing is keeping copies, snapshots of production data in production accounts. The challenge is that really leaves you exposed to data loss and ransomware if those accounts get compromised. And if you are using that for data retention, snapshots are a very expensive way to do it. So if you're not being very careful about managing that, you can either get too many and drive your costs up, or you can delete too many and then find you're non-compliant from a data retention perspective. And then the other piece that often isn't talked about, but I'll shine a light on it, is that if all you have for backup is snapshots, typically those aren't searchable. And I heard a stat the other day that 95% of the restore requests that are made are usually around file restores. And so without going through all the details, you have to guess at which snapshot you need. You have to basically reinflate that snapshot into a volume, rebuild a test system so you can mount it, search it, find the file. You hope that could take you 4 to 6 hours. But as I said at the beginning, it could be a little bit of trial and error. So it could take you days for a single file restore. Very inefficient. So what does Clumio offer? So we provide benefits against data loss and ransomware protection. It's what we call our air gap, and I'm going to show you that in a picture in a moment. But we basically make sure there's a known good copy of good production data that we use as a backup, and we put it in an immutable, store it in an immutable location that is not in production and therefore can't be compromised. We provide SaaS simplicity at a predictable cost. In this particular case, instead of pricing by VMs, we actually price by protected terabytes, or provisioned terabytes, I should say, that are protected, and retention, right? But with all of this, right, we don't price based on capacity used for backup, right? We manage that in the back end ourselves, and we have a whole engineering team looking at managing the costs with the public cloud provider that we use to make sure that that's effective. But any of that complexity is not something our customers have to deal with. And then the other key piece, tying back to the data recovery, is we build a global index and search capabilities. So when we start doing a backup in the background, and we use microservices to do this, we create an index and a catalog for that data that we backed up, which makes it searchable, right? So customers don't have to go through that reinflation, rehydration, mounting, searching, et cetera, they can actually, from within our user interface, search for the files, pick the ones they need by name and date, and then do the recovery. It is a lot faster than most other solutions out there today. So let me go, on this slide, let me go ahead and click into the specific details we have here as far as how we handle the robust data security. You see on the left is the typical approach when production copies are kept in production accounts. Again, if those production accounts get compromised, by either a good actor who might unwittingly delete something, or a bad actor who might, launch a ransomware attack, we prevent against that. We create that air gap. We basically provide that there's not going to be any single point of failure. That air gap is protected by integrity checks, the end-to-end encryption, and it's stored in an immutable format. And we manage all of that backup complexity with a single uniform set of policies that can really be applied anywhere the data is running. So with that, what we firmly believe, not only our founders, but also a good number of our investors, if you look here, over the last, literally, particularly the last 5 to 10 years, but even going back 20, this notion of the simplicity of SaaS is winning in the enterprise. You see it happening in all these different application areas, be it email, CRM, service management or HR. And we think there's an opportunity for us to bring that same kind of innovation to the table for backup. So that's what we think our opportunity is, and so far we're off to a really great start. We've got some great feedback from our customers along those lines. And so what I want to do is just leave you with this before we go to questions. Summary key takeaways is that we help provide protection against data loss and ransomware. We bring that promise of the cloud, the SaaS simplicity with a predictable cost model, which we think is critically important. And we also bring the true cloud scale. We leverage microservices, the up-to-the-date latest sets of capabilities. We unleash them on backup problems. And our ability to be able to do that means customers don't have to worry about capacity or compute resources, no capacity planning, none of that's involved. We simply take care of it and unleash the power of the cloud to be able to bring it to bear. So with that, that concludes my comments and slides. Thank you for your attention. I'd love to open it up for questions.
Absolutely, yeah, great presentation, Steve. Let me bring up this poll question. The question on the screen is, what additional information would you like about the Clumio solution? We'll just leave that up while we do some Q&A. So Thomas is asking, what's the licensing model for Clumio?
I touched on it earlier, but I'm happy to go over it again. So for the workloads that we support, particularly for VMs, the licensing is basically, it's a single price per VM. Our list is about $500 per VM per year. And again, that's what we found was when we talked to customers particularly, it was almost like, really, are you kidding? It's like, no, we're not kidding. We price by the VM. We don't price. So my VMs can get really, really big, and then the price is going to be the same. The answer is yes. So again, we're really trying to make it simple and that sort of thing. Because if you talk to customers, they know how many VMs they have. They probably have no idea how big they are. And when you look at projecting how big they're going to grow based on data growth rates and deduplication and compression and all this stuff, it gets very complicated. It's almost unknowable. So we decided that this approach would make it easy. And then from the point of view of supporting EBS volumes, again, we have a tiered model. Best way to get information on that is to contact us. But it's basically on the protected terabytes and the data retention period that you need for compliance. But those models are based on that there. Again, none of this is based on capacity used. Again, we take care of that in the back end.
Got it. Okay. Brett is asking, where does this run actually when, say, they install it on premises to protect their data? Is it a single VM, multiple VMs? How does that work?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So when you look at it, the thing that actually gets installed, we call it the Clumio Cloud Connector in a VM environment. It basically is a very lightweight OVA. Its installation is handled as a part of the 15 to 20 minute onboarding process. And for any VMware admin, it's just simply very simple. We just basically provide a pointer and it's kind of load and go. So that's the quote unquote local on-prem piece. It's very lightweight. In the case of EBS volumes, it's basically a similar kind of process, but what happens is a cloud formation template gets created so that we can provide the connection between the customer's EBS volumes and Clumio. Clumio itself, it runs in the cloud. Currently, we run on top of AWS, and that's how we take advantage of all the microservices and capabilities like Lambda, DynamoDB, Aurora, et cetera, to do different parts of our, to achieve different parts of our functionality. The point being, though, and that we've seen is in those particular cases where, let's say, you've got seeding going on, right? Your first initial, your first time seeding and loading, you can have, multiple OVAs, multiple cloud connectors get loaded and installed to push data across in parallel as it's needed. You find, obviously the heaviest data movement task is usually around seeding and whatnot. But then when those things are, when that part of the process is done, those things are shut down and they go away. All of the ongoing logic and tracking and all of that, it all gets managed in Clumio in the cloud.
Excellent, excellent. All right, lots
great
of good
question.
questions are cut. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, lots of great questions are coming in here. I'm queuing them up for Steve. Another good question is, we're using a snapshot manager to protect EBS volumes. Is that not enough?
Yeah, we find a lot of people are using, snapshot managers. They're saying, hey, good enough, I won't get fired. But, the reality is, today, because most of those snapshot managers, they do one or a combination of things. One, and I've seen even papers that say, well, you're taking a risk, but you'll get good performance. The notion of storing, all your snapshots in a production account, if those production accounts get compromised, again, you can be exposed to ransomware. And I've been in the industry long enough to know when I see that, clearly well more than half, I haven't seen a recent stat, but I know well more than half of the attacks are launched from the inside, not the outside. So thinking things are in production and that they're safe, unfortunately, I wish it was true, but this doesn't turn out to be. And so we do think companies, if you're doing that, you are potentially taking a risk with your data on one hand, and then the other hand is sometimes people don't realize that those snapshots are getting stored in their accounts. The average cost of those is really 2 to 3 times that of S3. And customers, if they make that decision, they wind up going down this path where retention to really meet, let's say HIPAA requirements, if you're a healthcare company, is going to be exceedingly expensive, or you're going to expose yourself to some level of data loss or a lack of compliance for data retention. So it's really not so great all the way around. And so that's why we say, hey, snapshots have their place, but it's not if that's all you're doing for protection for data in the cloud, it's really not sufficient from a cost point of view for data retention and for data protection. So that's why it's largely why we built the solution we built in the way that we built it.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. Another question here, James is asking, he says, let's see, we're migrating VMs to the cloud with VMware Cloud on AWS. Did you say you support both with one service?
Yes, absolutely. So when you log into Clumio, you get one interface. You have one login. You have different access to different data sources. And you would see your on-premise VMs, and you would see your cloud VMs, and you can set a policy, and you can, let's say, if you're doing just installing VMware Cloud on AWS, and let's say you had been using us for on-prem and VMware, as you would go ahead and do those migrations, you can basically take all those same policies and use tagging and just simply apply those policies to the new VMs as you move them over. And you can even, as I mentioned in the presentation, you can do the backups from on-prem, and you can use Clumio to do the restores to the cloud, so you can actually use that in what we call a protected migration. I won't go into the details of that here, but we have a blog by Chad Kenny, our chief technologist, that talks about how to do that.
Okay, nice. And then probably the last question we have time for here on our live Q&A session is, how should people get started with Clumio? What's the easiest step?
The easiest step, honestly, is to come to our website. Basically, there's several links there. You can check us out on the product pages and .com. But there's a link there. It's very prominent on the top right-hand corner. It says schedule a demo. You can look on the product pages and get a pre-recorded demo if you're not ready to talk to somebody yet. But if you are, schedule a demo. One of our CSEs would be delighted to take you through the product and show you its capabilities. But again, it's all literally come to .com. It's all out there on the product pages. Each workload that we support has a product video. It's all of 3 minutes of your time to get a good overview. And then if you're interested, and after that, we'd love to have you learn more. And we actually have basically a free trial where you can try actual backups, and 30 days basically risk-free. So got nothing to lose and everything to gain.
Very nice. Very nice. Awesome. Well, that's all the time we have for this presentation, or our Q&A, I should say, Steve. Thank you so much for being on the event today.
My pleasure. Thank you all very much.
Thank you to Clumio for supporting today's event. As Steve mentioned, visit clumio.com for more information, sign up for a free trial, and check it out for yourself. And now it is time for our first grand prize giveaway. But first, we've got an Amazon $500 gift card that's going to Stefan Luisser, Luisser from Pennsylvania. I can't pronounce it, but you're the winner. Congratulations, Stephen or Stefan. We also now have a grand prize to give away. That is going out to Duke Vulong from Colorado. Again, forgive me if I mispronounce it. DUCVULUONG. Congratulations. We'll reach out to both of you to deliver your prize, and I'll post the prize winners there in the Q&A as well. Got a lot more prizes to give out, but first it's time for our next presentation. And with that, I am excited to introduce Andrei Leibovich, who is the Chief Technology Officer at Datrium. Take it away, Andrei.
Thank you, and welcome everyone. Today I want to talk to you about how the cloud is transforming disaster recovery. But before we go ahead, let's look at some numbers and some statistics. Let's start with ransomware. So Gartner is saying that there has been a 700% increase in number of ransomware attacks since 2016. And that of course caused billions of dollars in outages and also ransom payoff. Now what's really interesting is that many of those companies have used DR, and they do have DR plans, and 80% of them had to use their DR plans in the past for months. But what's staggering is the number of companies that did manage to meet their SLAs. According to Gartner, 94% of the companies that used their DR plans didn't meet their RTO and RPO objectives. So basically, they didn't meet the SLAs that they agreed with the business. Here are the most common problems that we see with DR strategies. Firstly, DR often means buying 5 different products to manage your data twice. Once for your primary site and once for your secondary site. There's of course primary storage, there's backup involved, you have DR tools, encryption tools. This gets expensive rather quickly, and since these tools were not really designed to work together, this cobbled together solution is generally fragile and also unreliable. So the solutions are really complex. You need to set up runbooks, and then you need to create extensive documentation. And the moment something changes in your data center, your runbooks and your documentation are now out of date, which means your DR plans are now untested and hence completely unreliable. In fact, things were so bad for one of the companies that we've been working with that they provided this quote. They actually told us, and it's a joke, of course, but he said, I hope I would die because I don't have a way to solve my data center problems when I have a disaster. But now we talk about Cloud DR, but Cloud DR is really hard. And if not done properly, it will cost a lot of money and it will take a lot of time to fail over. So if you look at SAN vendors have traditionally optimized for Flash. And they work really well and fast inside the data center, and they do provide continuous replication. But when running in the cloud, you can't just do all Flash because everything is gonna get too costly. And then, generally speaking, they also don't have access to the VMware cloud. And if you don't have access to VMware cloud to VMC, you have to refactor your virtual machines into different formats, like EC2 as an example, and then refactor back to be able to replicate everything back to your data center. So it will get very expensive, and also you won't have a seamless VMware experience end to end. Backup vendors, on the other hand, also have the ability to snapshot and replicate and store on cheap S3 disks. But then they don't have the ability to rehydrate that backup into the VMware cloud in a rather quick fashion. Some of the customers that I've been working with realized that it would take days or even months to restore the data from deep archiving and from S3 into VMC, and that was a no-go for them. Datum, on the other hand, uses what's called a disaggregated architecture. We also do a continuous replication, but at the core, we use high capacity disks for capacity and use flash for performance. So we have the ability to restore capacity using S3, giving you a great cost. But I also have the ability to use flash to enable you to do instant restores into the VMware cloud. Moreover, we don't need to convert or refactor those virtual machines into the VMware format. We are VMware end-to-end, making it very simple and easy. Now, once you're running in VMware Cloud, you also have the ability to fail back everything to on-premise, only transferring the changes and the deltas that happen while you're running in DR mode. Now that we've looked why Cloud DR is hard and how Datum solves the problem, let's look at how Cloud DR is ripe for disruption and why now. Number one, VMware is now available on public clouds. That gives us a consistent environment and a consistent experience to migrate VMware workloads between on-premise and the VMware cloud on AWS, also known as VMC. But also between VMware cloud on AWS and other VMware clouds, eliminating complex VM conversions and refactoring. Number two, there's clear a spike in ransomware attacks. And the ability to recover from ransomware with very low RTO on-premise or in the VMware cloud is a huge benefit for organizations, especially when no conversions are required. Third, DR has been a very important part of organizations' business continuity plans, but DR is ugly and requires a lot of manual steps. So being able to automate not only DR on-premise, but DR to the cloud and make it as seamless as it can be and as efficient as it can be is a big opportunity for organizations to be able to focus on different areas that need attention. And finally, to be very blunt and honest, there are only weak offerings in the market when it comes to DR, and especially DR to the cloud. So those are some of the core reasons why Cloud DR is ripe for disruption and why Datum is able to capitalize and really help customers to achieve desired outcomes. Our mission is simple: to bring enterprise-grade DR to every IT team by cutting costs and complexity. And that's what we're going to talk here. And I'm going to start talking with an example. This is a real customer. They were running Nutanix for primary storage, Rubrik for backup. They had also a disaster recovery, a replication solution. So the Rubrik was replicating the backups to S3 and storing there. The DR solution that is not named here was replicating to EBS. When they had a DR, they would have to refactor those virtual machines in EBS and converted them into EC2 instance, power on. So they didn't really have a way to also to fail back. So with this solution, they had 4 products, 4 bills. They would need to do VM conversions. Their failover was cumbersome, and they didn't really have a way to fail back in an easy fashion. They moved to Datum, and now they have Datum in their private data center. They replicate to the cloud, store the data on S3, and they have the ability to leverage instant restores with VMware Cloud. So one product, one bill, one click failover, the ability to fail back, no VM conversion. Of course, the yield is great, and they were able to save money and become more. This whole solution became more cost effective. Another customer of ours that I have personally been involved with had 1,500 VMs and petabytes of VMs in capacity. They were also concerned about ransomware. Then they, as part of their strategy, they wanted to use cloud for backup and for DR. They looked at different solutions with backups, but the RTO to restore and rehydrate the backups into VMware Cloud or into EC2 would take almost a month and would require VM factoring, and that was a no-go for them. With Datrum, they realized instant RTO, so they have the ability to bring those virtual machines up and running in VMware Cloud instantaneously. They also solved ransomware on premises in the cloud, so they have the ability to use Datrum immutable snapshots to restore to any point in time on premise. But if the whole data center is compromised, they also have the ability to do that in the cloud, in VMware Cloud. They now have the ability to do on-demand expansion on-premise and also in the cloud. And they have been able to modernize their existing infrastructure. So they reutilize part of their investments in the data center and also acquire new servers and infrastructure, still using VMware and all the tools that they are familiar with. Now, we are trying to democratize DR and bring DR for everyone, for every VMware shop. With that, we have announced already the release of DRaaS Connect. DRaaS Connect enables you to use the same technology that Datrum is using and providing to their customers, but with your existing storage on-premise in your data center, and being able to snapshot and replicate all that through S3 and also leverage the VMware Cloud on AWS for DR. It's a pay-per-use solution. It's completely SaaS. It will provide you backup and DR, and it's going to be a one-stop billing shop for you. You come to Datrum for the VMware Cloud resources, for the AWS resources, and we'll bill everything for you monthly. Now, as part of the solution, you get an instant failover and also the instant failback and a complete centralized management. And another thing that is really interesting is DRaaS Connect is also going to enable you to protect your VMware Cloud resources, native resources, in one AZ in AWS to another AZ in AWS. So let's look at one-click instant failover. It's easy to talk in PowerPoint, but let's look how it works. And this is, by the way, this is actually generally available to all Datrum customers today. So when disaster strikes, you're going to lose your data center. It might be running Datrum DHCI. It might be running DRaaS connected with your existing SAN solution. But you do have other snapshots and replication that has been constantly being forwarded to Cloud EVX, which is part of the DRaaS solution. All this is completely duplicated, so it's very economic as far as capacity goes. But when the strike happens, you have your DR plans pre-established in a tool called ControlShift, which is also SaaS. And then DRaaS will establish a live NFS mount with the VMware SDC on the VMware Cloud and power on the VMs for you. Now, once the disaster is resolved and your sites are back online, you're going to leverage also ControlShift to do a one-click failback. And only the delta that happened, the delta changes or the change blocks that have been changed while you're running in DR mode are synchronized back to the DRaaS Cloud EVX solution and then back on premise. And then we execute an auto shutdown on the VMware Cloud. So you have the ability to do what's called on-demand. So we power on the SDC on-demand when needed. So you only pay when using the resources. There is also something called the Pilot Lite, which you leave a minimum number of hosts there, currently 3, to be able to fail over and get even better RTO. Now, all this is possible because Datrum is built on a 2-layer technology foundation that is similar to how AWS works. We use AWS EC2 nodes to scale performance on demand, and we use EBS for local flash cache. And then in the back end, we use AWS S3 with a global deduplication pool to scale capacity on demand. So that gives us the ability to scale performance also independent of capacity while you're keeping the capacity costs down because you're using a global deduplication pool on top of AWS S3. And all that is backed by a log structure file system that is perfectly designed to manage S3 objects. Now, when talking about recovering instantly from any backup, I'm really talking about it could be 5 minutes old, it could be a day old, it could be a month, or it could be up to 7 years old. And that not only enables you to, of course, DR everything to VMware Cloud and restore VMs just like you do with backup, but because the whole system is integrated, we also provide instant RTO, which means you can do a mass restart of VMs from any point in time and bring in thousands of VMs online in your primary data center, in your secondary data center, or in the cloud. And that also enables you to quickly recover from ransomware. Which is very different than when you do like synchronous replication as an example. Because if you do synchronous replication, you have a VM already replicating the ransomware data or encrypted data to your DR data center, and that will not help with restoring to production. So having point-in-time immutable snapshots enables you to choose when and how you are recovering your virtual machines in your applications. You can do that on-premise and you can do that in the cloud. Now, one thing is to say, yes, we have our DR plans in place. Let's execute. But the reality is that you set up those DR plans on day one, and you don't know if they are going to work on month 7 because things change in the data center. New servers are added, new applications are added, old infrastructure is removed. So Datrum provides the ability to do continuous compliance check, what we call RCO, recovery compliance check, every 30 minutes. So every 30 minutes, Datrum will check end to end and make sure that all the components that make that DR plan effective are in place and working. And if not working, Datrum will issue an alert and tell you, hey, something is not right here. You should fix this to make sure that DR is going to work when needed. Now, there are many solutions that will do fail over. And that's probably, I would say, the easiest part. But the tricky part is how you do failback. And how you do failback without having to reseed your entire data center. With Datrum, VMs are kept in their native format, as I mentioned, in VMware format. So this enables not only the smooth failover, but also a smooth failback. Now, while we are in DR mode, Datrum will do change block tracking and will ensure that only the changes that happen to the data since the migration to DR are moved back to your data center. And not only that, it does that actually using deduplication and compression. The data reduction when failing back drastically reduce the amount of money that you'll be paying for egress charges from AWS. There's something else that I need to worry about. The egress charges, that's when AWS will charge you for data being transmitted. And as always, data is encrypted, FIPS compliant, and always secure. Another important thing to notice is that because it's VMware end-to-end, there's nothing really to learn new about the system or the solution or how to manage everything. The entire Datrum solution is integrated into vCenter. And even when you go into DR, it's still vCenter. You will only see a different color on the logo, but there's nothing to learn. Your teams will be very comfortable in managing the entire solution, even if they have never managed a VMware Cloud solution before, or if they need to go in DR. So how do you get started? It's very simple because Datrum will take over all the service contracts and billing, including AWS. The VMC account will support the entire stack, all the services that are running on EC2 and S3. Will manage the DR orchestration, uptime, and compliance for you. The long-term archiving, the backup voting that is also provided as a service is managed by Datrum as well. And we will automate the DR plans for you and execute on the SLA. Now, you as a customer, there are 2 things that are very important that you would have to do. The first one is you need to create your DR plans and internal DR SLAs. And you do that before your DR event, of course. And then you need just to buy the right plan for yourself, which would be more than happy to talk to you through the options. Now, we've been getting a lot of traction with customers, and customers love our product and our services. You can go to, if you look at Gartner peer rating, you see that out of 5, Datum is 4.95, is one of the highest out there. And also our customer support service has been rated 9.2 plus, which is also incredible. And just hear some of the quotes from our customers and how they are using our technology and how they love the solution. So in summary, we provide a cost-effective, easy, and reliable disaster recovery solution, completely integrated with VMware Cloud and AWS, enables you to run your applications in your virtual machines on-premise in your production site. You can have either a Datum infrastructure, or you can have DRaaS connected to your existing infrastructure with snapshot and backup to AWS S3. We enable you to create disaster recovery plans and do seamless failover to VMware Cloud. That can be in an on-demand fashion, or it can be on a pilot light mode. And we will also enable you to fail back from DR only with the changes that happen while in DR without having to reseed your entire data center, drastically simplifying operations, saving time and money. So with that, I think we still have some time for a Q&A. I'll open for anyone that would like to ask questions about the solution.
Great presentation, Andre. Absolutely, we do have some questions here for you from the audience. Let's see here. First one, they're asking, how can you ensure my data is protected from ransomware?
That's a good question. So first of all, we need to understand that synchronous replication normally will give you very high availability and a quick restore, but it doesn't protect you against ransomware, because if your data is compromised, if your VMs are compromised, your source is compromised, your target will also be compromised. So you need to have a solution that will enable you to do a snapshot-based retention. And this is what we do. So we take snapshots on premise. Those snapshots are immutable, or that means that they cannot be changed. Of course, they can be deleted if you want as an administrator, but they cannot be changed. And those snapshots are then replicated either to a target site, like your DRaaS data center, or to the VMware Cloud on AWS. And as part of that, we use something called a Cloud EVX that runs on S3 and maintain all those immutable desktop snapshots. So that means whenever you take a snapshot, if you get compromised, you're able to roll back to any point in time. So you can roll back to 1 minute, 5 minutes, a month, and up to 7 years without ever losing those snapshots. Of course, you can apply retention and so on, and you can expire those snapshots if you want to, but if you don't want to, you have the ability to roll back to those immutable snapshots that will never be changed. And they are stored actually in a different area than the running virtual machines. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, very nice. Very nice. So once I have this disaster, my data was protected with Atrium, I fail over, how long would it take to actually fail back?
Right. And this is actually one thing that are probably the most overlooked piece in a DR scenario. So we are migrating all your data in a fully deduplicated and compressed manner to VMware to the Cloud EVX, where we store on AWS S3. And then from there, we mount this live NFS data store and get your VMs up and running, right? So once the VM is up and running, we need to make sure that we also get all the changes that are happening to those VMs and those applications and move back to S3 again. But what we do is that make sure that we only move the changes back. We don't have to reseed the entire data center. And that's what we do using VADP on the VMware Cloud SDDC. And then we only send the data that has been changed back on premise. And by the way, this is all orchestrated and now automated. Now, how long will it take? It's hard for me to tell you because it depends on the amount of data that has been changed, the change rate, the compression levels that we can get, the dedupe levels that we can get. But I can tell you one thing: it will be a lot faster than moving a full VM or a full data center to the cloud and back. In most scenarios, you can have your core virtual machines back up and running in a matter of minutes. And normally what we do as well as part of the DR plan, we start sending the data back on premise before we fail back. So whenever we're ready to fail back, you just say, shut down the VMs, take the last snapshot, move the data that has been changed over, and then you power on. So I know that for a fact, we can get VMs up and running in the VMware cloud in a matter of minutes. I think I've demoed recently something about 3 or 4 minutes to get VMs up and running. You should expect similar scenario on the way back, as long as you have the replication going back before you execute the failback plan.
Very nice. It's great to hear that you all have failback planned out and reliable and fast as well. I mean, I know a lot of solutions out there, failover is done and reliable, but failback is always kind of like, well, we'll cross that bridge when we get there.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Another question here that came in, they're asking, can I use the Datrium solution with my existing Nimble or Extreme IO? So do I have to have Datrium hardware installed in my data center, or can I use it with existing storage?
You don't. You can. So the whole DR piece solution, the DRaaS, and the way it works is applicable to the data center in general. You can have Datrium primary storage solution in your data center if you want, but if you already have an existing storage solution, use the DRaaS Connect, which is a downloadable virtual appliance that you download as a VM inside your data center and connect to your ESX host in vCenter. And we use VMware VADP technology to take snapshots and send to Cloud DVX and then to the VMware cloud, and the same thing on the way back. So the short answer, yes, no, you don't actually need to deploy any hardware in your data center. DRaaS Connect is a downloadable virtual appliance.
Very nice. It's cool to hear that Datrium now is, a totally software-based solution. Nothing hardware, is required to be installed on premises. So that makes it so much easier, I'm sure, for everyone out there to give this solution a try. And I mean, speaking of that, what do you recommend for people who are interested in this? How can they get started?
So there is a lot of content in our website. You can go to www.datrium.com and you'll see the papers, white papers, and resource guides. You can request someone to reach out to you to talk to you about it. But as far as testing, we also have online labs. We do POCs as well. So it's very easy to get things up and running. And you can use your own AWS resources. You can use our AWS resources. It's easy. We just need to talk through some of the details, but just reach out to us. You should be able to contact us through the website. That's probably the best way.
Awesome. Well, a really cool presentation, Andre, a really innovative solution from Datrium. Thank you so much for being on the event today.
Yeah, it was absolutely my pleasure. Thank you.
All right, great presentation there with Andre. It is now time for our next prize giveaway. Before I introduce you to our next presenter, while we do this prize giveaway, I've brought up the question on the screen that says, what additional information would you like about the Datrium solution? I'll just leave that up here. So our first prize that we need to give away is an Amazon $500 gift card. That's going to Matt Watt from Minnesota. Congratulations, Matt Watt from Minnesota. And then we have another grand prize. This is, again, for one of the Alienware Aurora gaming desktops. These are really cool. Wish I had one of these myself. But we've got this next one going to Roland Ellison from Tennessee. Congratulations, Roland Ellison from Tennessee. Stay tuned. We've got 3 more gift cards and 3 more grand prizes to give away still on the event. But now it's time to move on to our next presentation. And with that, I'm excited to introduce Mr. Andy Fernandez, Product Marketing Manager at Zerto. Andy, are you there?
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
I can, yeah. Thanks for being on, Andy. Take it away.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Everyone, I want to thank you first for your time. It really means a lot that you can hear us out. And my name is Andy Fernandez, and I'm here, Product Marketing Manager at Zerto. So let's get started with today's topic, really. And it's around, not just around DR and DRaaS and data protection and all the components that we're reviewing, but what it really consists of, right, which is IT resilience. But to give you guys a little bit of a background on who we are, as an organization, our desired outcome, our vision for all of our customers is to enable an uninterrupted world for all technology users, consumers, and businesses. I think we all know that in today's expectations, that's nirvana, that's the goal, and that's what we're trying to accomplish as an organization. We were established in 2009 with 5 global offices. We have over 8,000 customers in 75 countries and over 1,500 partners and strategic alliances as well. Now, if I had to pick one statement that really describes what we do, and it's the fact that we converge cloud mobility, disaster recovery, and backup solutions into a single, simple, scalable IT resilience platform. And we'll review how we do it, why we do it, and what makes it so simple and scalable as well. Now, most of us are aware of all of the disaster scenarios that we may have. It's not just about natural disasters or hardware failures, but you're seeing across the board things like ransomware and additional cyber attacks that are potentially DR scenarios. And what they're doing is, what we're seeing is a continued growth and a continued rise in the cost of disruptions to business, right? If you think about the average cost of downtime per hour was $250,000 per hour. Now, this was data from a survey that we did with IDC called the State of IT Resilience Report, right? And in this report, we interviewed, or IDC interviewed over 500 people, your colleagues, IT pros, directors of IT, system administrators, who are all exclusively focused on this. And their answer as an aggregate was over $250,000 per hour. And with an average of 8 hours of downtime, it's a collective $2 million a year in disruption, right? This is both with unplanned downtime, not even addressing planned downtime as well. Now, we know this is a challenge. Nobody wants any type of downtime, planned or unplanned, but there are specific challenges to recovery, specifically with disaster recovery. Now, in the same survey, we looked at all of these, and they're all very valid, right? But if you look at the top 5, it was data transfer migration, the cost and the budget. You're seeing much more complex licensing from DR, data protection, and backup providers as well. The recovery orchestration piece as well is a major challenge. Personnel training was really interesting one that we didn't expect. But the conclusion we came to was that some of these solutions, these legacy solutions, are bloated. They're outdated tools that require a lot of training, and it's simply not good enough. And the last one was workload migration. But you still have things like testing and complex infrastructure. They're all very valid challenges as well. But what I want to cover quickly is, when you look at a DR company or a technology, when you look at them for DRaaS, when you look at a backup provider, data protection provider, you have to look at some of the key differences, right? And when we consider our key differences at this organization is the core of our technology. We're based on continuous data protection. We maximize and make it as accessible as possible for you or a provider to take DR to the cloud. And as well, we try to make things as automated as possible, as simple as possible, so that you can do it at scale. Now let's go over this quickly. At first, at the heart of our technology, the most important thing that makes this possible is the fact that we have always-on replication. This means that we're not dealing with snapshots. We're software only. This is a very simple deployment, and it's replication that sits at the hypervisor level, not an appliance, not an agent that requires scheduling and requires snapshots as well. We're hardware and storage agnostic, meaning that you can take Zerto wherever you'd like, wherever you're trying to take your infrastructure, whether it's on-prem, in a public cloud, or in a private cloud. We pride ourselves on providing the lowest RPOs and RTOs and continuing to give an always protected environment for our customers and providers and their end users as well. Now, just as a quick example of why it's so important to avoid snapshots, right? If you think of backup technology, it's been around for decades, and there's been incremental innovations. But Zerto, we took a look at the first principles and really understood that snapshots aren't the most elegant. They're not the best experience, especially for today's requirements for downtime. So what our technology does using change block tracking and replication that sits at the hypervisor level is the fact that we build out this continuous stream of data relying on checkpoints that happen on an average of every 4 to 5 seconds. Now, think of the scenario where you're hit by ransomware, right? And this is a theoretical scenario, but let's say that you get hit at 10 p.m. or at 10 o'clock a.m. and you've realized that you've been hit by ransomware. Now, in traditional recovery, with your backup and recovery and tape and disk, you have to rely on your last snapshot, right? Maybe you're lucky and it happened that morning. You're still looking at inherent data loss. But what happens most of the time is the last backup was the day before, right? So you're looking at an entire day, sometimes at minimum, of data loss, right? That's even if your backup solution, your tape and recovery works effectively, it still inherently has almost a day of data loss, right? Depending on what your backup copy schedules look like. So that's already an inherent flaw that we differentiate ourselves with based on our replication technology. Now, that's on data loss, right? And we're going to cover a lot on the multi-VM applications as well. But one of the more exciting things we did last year with the release of Zerto 7 was the fact that we realized that our customers were asking us, if you're already helping us protect our VMs with DR, and we love the solution, it's easy. Why not use that technology to solve for our compliance and our long-term use cases, right? Think traditional backup. So what we did is we've essentially built out this journal and extended it, not to just sit on primary storage for a few days like the product used to do, but to actually sit across your entire environment. So you could have your journal in your primary storage for the short term, and then the rest can sit within the long term as well, right? And that's whatever type of purpose-built backup appliance you may have. We even have a public cloud target site now with AWS Storage Gateway as well. And what we give you is that same granularity, the same checkpoints, but you give you the ability to recover entire sites, recover the entire applications, VMs, and even specific file level recovery as well. And to do it all within the same UI and all seamless. Now, as we think about the nature of these multi-VM applications, right? You're looking at one entire enterprise application has multiple VMs, right? And so this introduces a lot of complexities. If you think about it, when you're archiving, that's fine, but when you're trying to recover a multi-VM application when you have a snapshot, that means that you have to take the time to try to identify the common denominator. And imagine having to do that across multiple enterprise applications. Our goal is to make that as simple as possible. We treat these multi-VM applications as one entity so that when in the instance you realize that you have to recover a specific application and you want to recover the entire application, you can just recover that application. And it only takes a few steps to create what we would call a virtual protection group, which is that entity or that application that contains all of the VMs that you need in there as well. So, we look at solving for data loss, but we also look at solving for some of even the bigger consequences of a ransomware attack, the amount of time it takes for IT organizations to recover their data. So that is one of the biggest influencing decisions that we have within our customers because they realize they're able to recover in seconds. Now, because we're software only, because we're agile, we don't rely on agents, we're not an appliance, we continue to innovate and we continue to build out a strategy that not is just focused on DR, it's not just focused on data protection, but also our migration capabilities. And what we envision is that you deliver IT resilience, and that's whatever your environment looks like, whether you're on private cloud, whether you're on public cloud like Azure or AWS, or you're simply on-prem. You can deliver the disaster recovery as a service, and data protection capabilities without any change. Now, that's because of our architecture. That's because we're software only, and between the production site, you can replicate at the VM level to Azure. You can do it to IBM Cloud. You can do it to AWS or one of our managed service providers of your choice. And that also includes something new we've developed with Microsoft, which is the Azure VMware solution, meaning that you can run VMware using Azure as well and still have the usual UI, the capabilities that you already know they're near and dear to your heart with VMware, but still using it with the cost effectiveness of Azure. So that's what's really important here, the fact that you can go to a public cloud, you can come back, you can do that with a private cloud as well. At our core, our product is built based on giving you ultimate freedom and flexibility to make the choices that you need to do that are best for your organization and the SLAs and performance that you want. Now, just to touch a little bit more on the Azure situation, we have a very special relationship with Azure, as we are with our other strategic alliances. But with Azure, we're really focused on becoming partners. And what we do as partners is we design together, we work together, they build out APIs for us, and we can build out even better solutions for us that make your working with Azure much easier. Now, if you think of all of our use cases and capabilities with Azure, you have the traditional replication technology that we have. You can take that journal and you can replicate to, from, and between Azure sites. We make sure that you can reduce your DR costs with Azure via native APIs. You can even run VMware in Azure with the Azure VMware solution, as we discussed. But you can even go down to the database, and you can protect SQL Server with Zerto as well. And you can do the same thing with SAP. Anything that you can protect with Zerto, you can also quickly migrate. As many, just few clicks as it takes to protect, it's the same amount for migrations. And that's what really differentiates and solves for a lot of the challenges that people have with disaster recovery. And that reflects in our vendors, that reflects in our providers. If you look at the Forrester Wave or the Gartner Magic Quadrant, all of the MSPs that you see there, a large majority of them, are Zerto powered. And we've looked at kind of our disaster recovery replication, right, and our data protection and our journal. But one of the best things as well is the orchestration automation capabilities that we have. We make this management across clouds with one interface. Whether you have something on premise and you're in public cloud and you're private cloud, you're able to simply manage it all from one UI. The orchestration is seamless. You can even automate things in over 3 clicks. That applies to your testing as well. It's extremely critical that you continue testing, especially in the day that we live now with all the threats that are looming, especially on the cybersecurity side. We offer non-production impact testing that also includes performance reporting so that you have something to provide to compliance as well. And because of this simplicity as well, we're always continuing to make sure that you have recovery RTOs and RPOs that are satisfactory or even better than what you expect. Now, just an idea of that simplicity, right? If you think about performing a failover, or even a failover test, it's extremely simple. This is our ZVM, our GUI, and what you can do here immediately from the homepage, you can click a failover, you can select the apps that you want to fail over, you select that, and then all of a sudden you immediately fail over. That's within 4 clicks you're able to do that. We focus on simplicity. Everything we build, we make sure that you can do it as soon as possible and that you can do it with anybody in your organization as well. Now, Zerto Analytics is very interesting because if you think about most organizations that have a platform, this platform is sold separately. You have different SKUs, right? For example, if you want to buy a backup tool, you also have to buy the analytics that come with it in a separate product. With us, our analytics are SaaS delivered. They're completely integrated into the product. You can access them from anywhere. And we always give you full visibility and we give you full compliance reporting so that you can understand exactly if your replication's failing, if your long-term retention jobs are doing enough, if everything's active, or if there's an issue, you can address those anomalies as well. And that's why we have an example with one of our customers who've done very well. That's Ulta Beauty. Ulta reduced their RPO and RTO by 98%. They failed over 10 million e-commerce apps out of their DR site for a week. They had switched from RSM with VCR replication, and they focused on having our continuous block-level replication. And if you look at performance loss, or the performance and data loss, they went from 24 hours of data loss to 7 seconds. And most importantly as well, they reduced recovery time from 3 hours to 5 minutes. And they were extremely happy with this. And we have so many more cases where it's not just about disaster recovery or about data protection, but also about migration and workload mobility. And we're giving our customers tangible, quantifiable impacts on their performance, on their ease of use, and their ability to do what's necessary for their organization. So just to summarize things quickly, from a DR and a DRaaS perspective and data protection, why Zerto? We'll give you the best performance. You'll experience the best RTOs, RPOs in the industry. You'll be able to do that in whatever environment you please, whether that's on-prem, public, or private cloud. And most importantly, you can do it simply. You can protect, recover, and test your workloads with ease, simplicity, automation, and orchestration as well. That's what we strive for. These three key critical factors are what's most important to us. And as we continue our product journey and continue maturing and growing as a platform, it's with these 3 things in mind that we continue to do so. So that gives you an idea of what the Zerto IT Resilience platform is, right? with visibility and analytics into all of it, based on a foundation of continuous data protection. You have disaster recovery, you have operational recovery and long-term retention. Think of that as your traditional data protection and backup use cases, but without the snapshots. And then you have the ability to do it in hybrid, multi-cloud, and you also have your operational services around testing, around data forensics that we provide as well. So this is really at our core who we are. One of the things that I wanted to highlight as well that we offer is if you're interested in moving your workloads to Azure, we offer a cost calculator that kind of gives you the visibility that you need in order to do so. So apparently the slides got muddled. So if you click that link below, you'll be able to access it, get an idea from a financial perspective how much it's going to cost, but we also offer the same thing from an infrastructure perspective. Also, I want to invite you guys to ZertoCon. We have Kevin Mitnick, the world's most famous hacker as well. And if you use this promo code, you'll be able to get early bird pricing as well and see more sessions on disaster recovery, DRaaS, and whatnot. So before we move to Q&A, I want to make sure that you're able to see some of the assets that we've posted. I know if you look at your handouts, you're going to see the Converged DR and Backup data sheet. But if you want something a bit more in depth, you're able to check out the feature of Backup White Paper. You click that link, it's going to give you a complete understanding of what we do as a product and why we're pursuing data protection and see backup as a thing of the past. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to review a few of these questions and make sure that we get everything for you guys. We also always like to see our customers commenting here as well. Let's see what we have.
Great.
Sorry, apologies.
Oh, I was going to say, great presentation, Andy. We do have some great questions coming in there. While you're reviewing them, I was just going to bring up this poll question for the audience that says, what additional information would you like about the Zerto solution? And so we'll just leave that up while we do some Q&A. Andy, which question there caught your...
Yeah, so essentially, one of the biggest questions they always get, and we had mentioned this, are you an appliance now? We're software only. One of the other questions that we get is, what does our licensing look like? What we do is we license per VM, kind of giving you the most scalability and personalization by your environment so that you can really purchase only what you need. Now, if you look at some of the technology as well, we had a few questions around the snapshots and the replication. You can replicate to public and private cloud. Our journal-based replication works anywhere, so we've extended that journal to cover for backup use cases, but it's still that same journal capability that you know, simply also solving for long-term scenarios as well. And let me review. I think I have one more question specific to this, and let me check. Oh, one of the common questions that we always get to is, how long does it take Zerto to get up and running, right? Well, if you think about the nature of our product, it's extremely simple. It is a small install, and it's not a device. So we've had customers, large enterprise customers, that we've come in after the POC and after they've purchased everything, we've been able to have them up and running within a few hours. And that's just in one day. That's for the entire platform because of how simple, because of how scalable it is. So if there's any other questions, I will copy them, and I will make sure to, within the next presentation, be able to answer that for you. But I want to thank you all for your time.
Absolutely, yeah. Great presentation, Andy. I love seeing the feedback here coming in. Garrett, Brian, Rodney, they all said they use Zerto, love the product. So thank you for sharing that. Kenny just said in the Q&A here, our installation was a breeze, setup was very easy. So love to see things like that. I know there's a few questions we didn't get to, and like Andy said, he'll respond to those here shortly. Thank you again, Andy, for being on the event today. And
thank you so much.
Zerto. Yeah, and thank you to Zerto for supporting today's Data Protection MegaCast. Like Andy said, make sure you download the handout that's available for download there in your audience console, and also visit Zerto.com and give the solution a try for yourself. I'll just leave that poll question up while I announce our next set of prize winners. So we have another Amazon $500 gift card. That's going to John Felsky from Illinois. Congratulations, John Felsky from Illinois. And we have another one of these really awesome Alienware Aurora gaming desktops. That's going to Matt Kirschner from Pennsylvania. Congratulations, Matt Kirschner from Pennsylvania. 2 more gift cards and 2 more grand prizes to give away, so make sure you stay tuned for those. All right, it's now my pleasure to introduce our next presenter on today's MegaCast. That is Mr. Ed Collins, Senior Product Marketing Manager at Nutanix. Ed, are you there?
I'm here.
Thanks for being on the event today. Before we kick it off, before I hand it over to you, we've got a quick poll question for everyone out here in the audience. And I'm curious to find out the results of this, as I know you are, Ed, and that is, how would you rate your current disaster recovery and data protection capabilities? So I encourage the audience to respond to that, and I'll share the results of this poll here with you so you can see, how you stack up with your peers who are on the event today. So I'll give everyone here just a moment to answer this question. And the answers rate all the way from great. Basically, you love what you have right now, and then it goes all the way down to not good. Like, we've got to do something immediately. This product is not helping us, and our business is exposed. And then finally, we don't have any data protection solution in place at all, which also, to me, falls in the category of we have to do something right away. So thank you, everyone who answered that poll question. Let me share the results of this with you. And it looks like 29% said, they're adequate, things are okay, but they haven't improved much. They haven't done a lot with it. 24% said they're good. 19% said they're great, and they're looking for, to learn about new technology innovations. Then at the flip side of it, 18% said they really need some improvement. 4% said things are not good. 2% said they don't have anything in place at all right now. So, Ed, what's your take on that?
I think that's pretty consistent from what we've seen with our customers, especially with the concentration at the midsection there. We do see companies that have more than adequate disaster recovery solutions in place, but since the market is evolving, I think that most people are sort of in that middle zone or even in the needs improvement zone, just through the nature of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what's so great about this event. It's a great opportunity for everyone out there, no matter where you are in that spectrum, to learn about, new innovations, because data protection might not be something you're working with every single day. You might not be looking at it every single day. This event is a great opportunity to learn about everything that's new. And with that, I'm excited to hand it over to you, Ed, and you can tell us about, what's going on with Nutanix and what's new.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Again, my name is Ed Collins. I'm a product marketing manager for Nutanix, and I have the pleasure of speaking to you today about disaster recovery and data protection solutions from Nutanix. What we'll discuss today, we'll look at the state of disaster recovery and data protection from a marketing perspective, and then we'll look at how Nutanix solutions address those market needs. And then we'll dive a little deeper into specific Nutanix products, starting with our core disaster recovery product, which is Leap. And for those of you who might opt for a cloud-based solution, we'll talk a little bit about disaster recovery as a service with Leap. And then finally, we'll wrap things up with hyper-converged secondary infrastructure with Nutanix Mine. Let's begin by looking at some of the key challenges that companies face today in the disaster recovery market. For starters, what we see is there's the disparate solutions. They still dominate the marketplace. So things like traditional data protection solutions are often comprised of a patchwork of point products from a variety of vendors. It's not that the individual products are inferior. Rather, it's a solution level challenge that must be addressed holistically in order to be truly effective. Multiple vendors do offer point solutions for high availability, backups, disaster recovery, targeted storage, and long-term data retention. However, the integration and maintenance aspects of these things remain complex. The second thing is that cloud readiness is a bit stunted. What I mean to say is that companies are trapped in traditional backup infrastructures that were never really designed to embrace the cloud. Some do have a cloud footprint, but the reality is that due to management complexities
the hybrid cloud nirvana hasn't been met. Cross-cloud management really must be unified in order to be most effective. And then also, DR is often an afterthought. Upon close inspection, it turns out that many companies treat DR reactively instead of proactively, as it should be the case. And then finally, recovery can be unpredictable with traditional solutions. In the absence of the ability to, say, test a disaster recovery solution regularly, it's impossible really to possess confidence that the solution will work when it's actually called upon. Not only is this a risk to the business, it also is perceived as a risk to folks like insurance companies who jack up premiums due to lack of compliance or assurance that the solution will actually work when it's called upon. So let me introduce you to the Nutanix suite of solutions in the area of disaster recovery and data protection. Nutanix has a comprehensive range of disaster recovery and data protection solutions available today. We've been a leader in the hyperconverged infrastructure market for years, having pioneered many of the benchmark technologies that have modernized today's data centers. With Nutanix, compute, storage, virtualization, and networking are hyperconverged into a self-healing data fabric that is managed through a single pane of glass. So it's important to remember that Nutanix hyperconverged infrastructure is really the starting point for our discussion today. From the ground up, the Nutanix software stack provides resiliency among virtual machines. In other words, if one node is failing, others will pick up the slack automatically and without any manual intervention required. As an extension of this core architectural philosophy, secondary data centers, when provisioned, become a native component of the overall self-healing data fabric. Again, all of this is managed through a single management interface we call Prism. Furthermore, by taking virtual machine snapshots based on customizable RPO metrics and replicating them to secondary data centers, the system also affords businesses reliable failover during disaster events. We call this disaster recovery technology LEAP. LEAP is a simple-to-use disaster recovery service that features protection policies and recovery plans to automate failover and failback scenarios, whether planned or unplanned. So as you can see in the graphic, depending on the needs of a business, a variety of LEAP DR solutions are available. For starters, we have what we call async, which really puts the recovery point objective at about an hour. We also offer near sync, where the RPO is about a minute. And then we also offer Metro, which really is the high end, where RPO is 0. Each of these solutions are zero touch, meaning once configured, no manual intervention is required to ensure data protection is actually occurring. The only thing left for a user to do is click once within Prism to fail over in the event of a disaster. This is very different from traditional disaster recovery and data protection solutions, where, as many of you know, orchestrating a response to a disaster is arduous, requiring lots of manual intervention. So with the Nutanix LEAP solution, things really are very different. We've eliminated the stress of orchestrating a failover scenario by taking care of all the details for you. This solution also ensures your service level agreements are met. And for peace of mind, Nutanix provides non-production environment disaster recovery testing, which is critical, but historically time-consuming, if at all possible, often completed over the weekend. Failover testing can be accomplished without affecting normal business processes. That's the key. And this means that you're able to comply with regulatory mandates and still keep your weekends free. Now, if a secondary data center is too CapEx heavy, Nutanix Leap technology can be extended to include a pay-as-you-go disaster recovery as a service solution called XyLeap. Now, XyLeap uses a global footprint of public cloud data centers that are owned and operated by Nutanix. And since XyLeap uses the same Nutanix software stack as the on-prem data centers do, integration and onboarding is completed often in under an hour. Finally, I want to mention Nutanix Storage Backup Solution. That's Nutanix Mine. So Nutanix Mine is purpose-built to address the need for an integrated data backup service. It offers one-click data protection and archival, and it also offers industry-leading integrated solutions with Veeam and Haiku. In fact, Nutanix has a stable of ecosystem partners for backup. So we've seen the solution level perspective. Now let's take a deeper look at how Nutanix provides invisible infrastructure to our customers. Some DR and data protection situations demand the highest level of protection, for example, with business critical apps. A perfect example is a 911 service. Now imagine you're running an emergency service. The availability of your IT infrastructure is going to save lives. So the reality is you have to be operational 24/7 by 365. And the question is, how do you ensure that? Well, for starters, your IT recovery metrics need to be 0 RPO and 0 RTO. How do you achieve that with Nutanix? The answer is Nutanix Metro clusters. Really what a Metro cluster is a zero-touch, high-availability solution across 2 sites that's separated by 5 millisecond latency to ensure this 0 RPO and 0 RTO. Metro clusters, as we just saw with the 911 scenario, they're not always easy to implement and deploy because of geo-economic reasons, things like distance or fault lines, etc. Metro-like speeds may also not even be a requirement in the first place. So we have other options to address less demanding requirements. We have what I alluded to earlier, near sync technology. Now with near sync, it means near 0 RPO service level agreements. With near sync, your maximum data loss is 1 minute, and you still get the one-click experience across both, say, ESXi and AHV hypervisor deployments. Just to summarize, near sync technology, really there's a 1 minute RPO that's indicative of it, which means minimum data loss, not quite like the Metro situation, but still very good. It's very cost efficient for non-business critical apps, and it's easy to deploy and scale since it's a native Nutanix feature. And then finally, to close out our Leap disaster recovery portfolio, for some companies, building out a new data center isn't an option. It could be for financial reasons even, for example. A good example oftentimes is small to medium-sized business customers cannot afford a secondary data center, which frequently results in cobbling older equipment together in hopes that it'll support the production workload if and when a disaster strikes. For these customers, building and maintaining another data center just for disaster recovery isn't always the best use of their finances. In other words, maybe an OpEx model would free up cash for other business activities. Furthermore, there's also the reality that many businesses are strapped with a cloud mandate policy imposed at a higher level, say at the CIO level. For these customers, there's a native extension to the Leap technology called XyLeap Disaster Recovery as a Service. So let me just summarize Zyleap from a feature perspective. It is built in. Zyleap is a native service to Nutanix software and managed through a single pane of glass. This facilitates goodness such as instant onboarding. So things like workload, security, and network profiles, they're automatically ported over to the Zyleap cloud. It does boast a one-click failover. We know that DR orchestration here is automated, achieving service level agreements with tailor-made RPO and RTO metrics in place. We offer non-disruptive testing, which really means that routine examination of your disaster recovery readiness is achieved for, say, regulatory compliance. It also provides end-to-end security by using strong encryption for data at rest and data in flight. And then finally, it's a pay-as-you-go model where there's a flexible subscription pricing model that turns CapEx into OpEx. Just some of the key takeaways on the Zyleap solution. It eliminates, of course, the second disaster recovery site. So running disaster recovery as a service in Zyleap completely obviates the need for a secondary site, considerably reducing the total cost of ownership for a disaster recovery solution. The second point is that it is a subscription service with guaranteed SLAs. There's no need, of course, then to procure or refresh on-prem infrastructure. And then finally, it's all managed through a single pane of glass. The entire solution is managed through Prism, which is Nutanix's premier management platform. So turning our attention now from disaster recovery with Leap to secondary storage, the backdrop of this market is that legacy solutions present several drawbacks. Let me explain, and I'll use a Gartner poll to help us out. Point solutions, for starters, point solutions are complex. They can be. Backup solutions are typically provided by 4 or maybe even 5 different vendors, siloed across dozens of different locations, often on aging infrastructure. So this adds both cost and complexity to managing these point solutions for things like backup, archival, target storage, and long-term retention. 41% of those polled in the Gartner poll said that existing storage solutions were too complex to manage. The second point I want to make is that secondary data is very often underutilized. So secondary data is often referred to as dark data, as no one knows where it lies or how to retrieve it, and most importantly, how to derive any real value from it. These reasons make secondary data a liability, in a sense, rather than an asset. And then third, data growth is causing problems as well. As data grows in your primary environment, there's a spiraling storage cost associated with adding capacity in the secondary environment. 45% of those polled said it's too high. Also, backup speeds are often too slow. 37% polled said that. And then finally, at times, backup operations are completely unsuccessful. I think it was 14% or so polled said that less than 10% of the time, their backup scenario is actually successful. So just to summarize all of this from a market perspective, the reality is that the market for secondary storage is still dominated in many ways by traditional technologies. And interestingly, the vast majority of an organization's data is critically underutilized, where backup data is relegated to being data stored deep in archives, file shares, tested dev systems, etc., where its potential utility and therefore its value to the business is reduced pretty much to nothing. Whenever possible, it's quite beneficial to efficiently manage and mine all of this siloed data and use it in such a way that it is, or its utility is maximized. In other words, take something that's a potential liability and turn it into an asset. Nutanix aims to bring hyperconvergence to this space, to secondary storage, thus enabling this transformation of data utility. So allow me to introduce you to Nutanix Mine. The solution looks like this. With Nutanix Mine, we are extending the core strengths of our enterprise software stack to the secondary storage space. Mine is tightly integrated with both the Nutanix hyperconverged infrastructure data fabric and the Prism management console. It integrates with data protection software from Veeam and Haiku, enabling this third-party software to run in a hyperconverged manner on the Nutanix core operating system. Mine is also entirely self-sufficient, turnkey solution, providing compute, memory, storage, and data backup. And then also, archive tiering is an option, such as would be the case with, say, Nutanix Objects, Cloud, or really any S3 compatible storage. So the key use cases for Mine that we see are obviously data protection, but recovery, oftentimes compliance, and of course, long-term retention and archival. And then finally, I'll say this about Mine. The key customer benefits really provides a faster time to value because of the nature of the solution. Nutanix Mine provides an end-to-end improved customer experience, all the way from sizing your backup environment to ordering, deploying, managing, and even scaling it out. It also unifies IT operations, so customers that care about simplicity and scale, and as a result are drawn towards HCI, can now adopt a similar approach to address their backup and archiving needs. And then finally, it scales out effortlessly. The ability to expand your existing secondary infrastructure to scale with the business or grow as you need it is available. And so I just want to finish this way. That includes my overview of the Nutanix disaster recovery and data protection solutions. But I'd like to give you three key takeaways before we depart. First, Nutanix software has been architected from the ground up to make your life easier, to help make running your business even a delight. Second, doing disaster recovery well is a difficult proposition, especially with legacy solutions. But with Nutanix, it's incredibly simplified, whether you choose to deploy multiple private clouds or opt for a hybrid cloud disaster recovery as a service model. And then finally, modernizing your data storage solution with Nutanix Mine eliminates several bottlenecks while simultaneously converting stored data from being a liability to an asset. The slides got ahead of me there, but that's okay. I do encourage you, see there on the slide, I encourage you to follow up with us first chance you get and stay on that to take a test drive, look at Nutanix Mine in greater detail, engage with us at the .next conferences, schedule a meeting, or follow us on Twitter or LinkedIn. And so with that said, I would just like again to say thank you for joining us, and I'll hand it back to Dave.
Great presentation. Ed, let's see, we do have some questions here for you from the audience. Dwayne has been answering questions as they came in, so we worked through quite a few questions already. If you do have questions about the Nutanix solution, now's the time to get them in. I'm going to bring up this poll question that just says, what additional information would you like about the Nutanix solution? And we'll just leave that up here while we do some Q&A. So the first question that came in, they're asking, what happens if a service level agreement metric like RPO isn't met? How does that work with Nutanix, Ed?
So the Nutanix software monitors and reports out-of-bound conditions through the Prism management interface. So you also have the opportunity to perform live and failover, failback testing in order to validate these SLA metrics, that making sure that they're satisfied. So one of the great benefits of BCDR with HCI is that system level monitoring and oversight is achievable through automation, and whenever alerts are brought to the attention of the end user, they're in complete control.
Very nice. Very nice. Okay. So, I mean, what about another question here? Is it recommended that users perform DR testing during non-working or production hours?
Yeah, that's one of the greatest benefits, I think, of the Nutanix solution, that disaster recovery testing can be accomplished during normal working hours because the testing occurs in what we might call a sandbox type environment on a separate subnet from your production environment. This means that you no longer have to chew up your nights and weekends, really, to perform this testing. And testing also generates reports for the sake of satisfying, government or corporate and or, say, insurance mandates.
Yeah, that's always so important, when it comes to compliance, is having the reports, the data to kind of back it up. But you can't do that unless you have a test, and it's hard to find the time to do a test. So you all at Nutanix make it real easy because you can do it just about any time. I like that.
Exactly.
Another question here, does Nutanix publish recommendations for sizing its solution or pricing?
Yes, so Nutanix solutions can be sized using the online sizer at sizer.nutanix.com. We also have a pricing tools online for each of our solutions that can be found at the individual product pages.
Okay, nice. So sizer.nutanix.com, and then there's pricing tools online. Let's see, another question. What about a simplified migration path for existing Nutanix customers to move from a private cloud only model to DRaaS? Is that possible?
Yeah, actually we've seen some of our customers really just simply repurpose existing Nutanix nodes from DR specific workloads to active workloads. In other words, when they migrate, they're basically repurposing nodes that were used as failover nodes to active workloads. Because Nutanix is a software company, it's really less about what hardware it's running on than which particular services are running where. For example, I've got multiple customers repurposing their existing CapEx investment to complement and an expanding on-prem footprint, and then signing up for, say, Xylete Disaster Recovery as a Service subscription to satisfy their disaster recovery needs. So technically speaking, it's as easy as reassigning resources through the Prism management interface.
Nice, nice. I love that you can repurpose, existing hardware. That makes it much more affordable. Let's see, you stated that Mine includes third-party vendors. Veeam and Haiku. Is Mine available today?
It is. We launched Mine in January of this year, so it's totally available. I think it's on, correct me if I'm wrong, Dwayne, I think it's 5.11.
Yep, that's correct.
Okay.
Very nice. So if somebody wanted to get started with Mine, can you kind of walk us through the process? Do they go and they do a test drive or demo or POC? How does that work?
Everything's done through mynutanix.com. So the entry point typically, if they're not being sort of handheld with a sales rep or what have you, most of it's done right through the website, and you get started that way. There are, all the necessary content that you need to get started is going to be right there at the landing page.
Very nice. Very nice. Awesome. Well, I think that's all the time we have for our Q&A, but it's been great having you on today. Thank you so much, Ed, and thank you, Dwayne, as well.
I appreciate it. Thanks a bunch.
Thanks, David.
All right. Thank you. And thank you to Nutanix for supporting our MegaCast event today. For more information, of course, visit Nutanix.com, sign up, do a test drive, and check out the new Mine disaster recovery data protection solution available from Nutanix. And now it's time for our next prize giveaway. We have another Amazon $500 gift card that's going to Andrew Schley, S-C-H-L-E-I, from Iowa. Congratulations, Andrew from Iowa. And we have another grand prize. This is another Aurora gaming PC from Alienware. The prize winner for that is Matt Collins. Congratulations, Matt Collins from Illinois. We've got one more gift card and one more grand prize to give out still. after our next presentation, so make sure you stay tuned. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our next presenter on the MegaCast. That is Adam Margette, Technical Specialist at Unitrends. Adam, are you there?
Hey, David. Good afternoon. How are you, sir?
Doing great. Great to have you on again. Take it away, Adam.
Hey, fantastic. I really appreciate it. And hello, everyone who's been riding out the event for a little over 3 hours. Going to wrap things up with Unitrends all-in-one data protection solution. So as David had mentioned, my name is Adam Margette. I'm a technical specialist here with Unitrends, serving our field marketing organization for the last 4 or so years. So it's absolutely a delight, and I'm thrilled anytime I have the opportunity to meet or speak with folks, whether it's a larger kind of presentation format, some of the smaller local events. So really appreciate the opportunity here. Before we talk more specifically about Unitrends, our solutions, and one of the challenges that we're enabling our customers to solve, I think that it's important to outline the problem and the risk that's facing IT today. And as we're increasingly monetizing and digitizing our operations and relying upon applications to drive profitability, to drive productivity, downtime has become incredibly costly. And the industry has really coalesced around this figure here, about $9,000 per minute, the average cost of a data center outage. Now, whether you feel that your organization transacts at significantly higher levels, you're heavily involved in e-commerce, or maybe you transact at lower levels, you're a nonprofit or a smaller localized retailer or service provider, there's still significant risk because this figure takes into account not just the organization's inability to transact in periods of downtime, but also the impacts on employee productivity when their applications and systems are unavailable, impacts on customer experience that could potentially harm the brand reputation, and ultimately the cost of recovery. What disaster do we need to recover from? What does that protocol look like? There are going to be different situations that we may need to respond to. For a lot of organizations that are starting to evaluate new technology and are maybe receiving pushback, I think that this is a really helpful chart to look at the impact when you're unable to deliver a lot of those key services. A lot of organizations are striving for 4 or even 5 nines of availability, but for organizations that are unable to meet those requirements or deliver that kind of availability, there's increased risk there. The 3 nines of availability, about 44 minutes per month of unplanned downtime, is a risk of $400,000 to the organization. Certainly, 99% availability opens you up to significant risk. So just one factor or kind of one set of figures that you can use in trying to justify the cost. A lot of the customers that we're working with here at Unitrends have been tasked with trying to do more with less, and it's very much a world where they're being asked to deliver more availability, more services, improve user experience, and those demands are not always correlated with an increase in budget, in resources, and in staff. And kind of the last piece here as we set the stage is that we're responding to outages that may differ in their frequency from a lot of what we see in the news. When you're thinking about disaster recovery, a lot of times you're grabbed to a fire, a flood, a significant storm, or a weather impact, viruses and malware. That's a smaller percentage of the incidents that we're responding to. In a lot of cases, it's internal issues with software or human error that are leading to that downtime. And as we look at this chart here, I kind of view things along a spectrum here. And again, how do we need to respond? Do we need to recover individual files because we had a user accidentally delete something? Do we need the ability to quickly recover our virtual machines or a crashed instance of software, or do we need means to fail over and maintain the operability of our entire site or a larger number of machines or workloads in the event of a larger outage? And regardless of what that disaster looks like, that's what us here at Unitrends are striving to arm our customers with. We've been in this space for 30 years, or a little over 30 years, celebrated our 30th anniversary last September. Originally founded in 1989, and over several iterations and evolutions, it's evolved into what Unitrends is today. And more than 30,000 customers across the globe trust us for their data protection and disaster recovery needs. We're helping those customers protect a combined aggregate in excess of 2 exabytes of data. And the Unitrends Cloud, a proprietary manufacturer's operated solution, we're managing over 100 petabytes of our customer data in the Unitrends Cloud. We're going to talk a little bit more specifically about that use case, but you can even see right here picture on the map roughly of where those global data centers are located. I think really important to note is the customer support organization that we have behind all of our products, our hardware, our software, our cloud services. And for our users, it's a holistic experience because you've got now a vendor and a support group that's taking ownership for the entire business continuity stack, the local software and hardware, the offsite recovery, long-term retention in the cloud, that disaster recovery as a service. There's no finger pointing among Unitrends because we're taking ownership for the entire solution. So for a lot of our customers, as technology has started to evolve and as we've started to shift workloads and embrace some of the many benefits of cloud, their environment has started to sprawl. Your current backup and recovery infrastructure may look something like the stack on the left here. You've got your on-premise backup software that's sitting on top of a third-party OS. Your operations may be virtualized. You've got server and storage that you've back-ended in here. You've started to invest in cloud, and now you've got infrastructure, backup software for those cloud instances, cloud storage, the ability to test all of this. How do we know that we're going to be able to recover? As environments have grown and folks have kind of added more and more to what they're doing, trying to achieve that overall vision of business continuity, we've seen these Frankenstein solutions open up unnecessary complexity and risk for users where you're burdened with kind of low-value IT tasks, tuning and management of systems, potential risks of interoperability, that finger pointing that can occur between multiple vendors. You're trying to get a VM to restore. You're having an issue. You call the software provider. They say, no, that's definitely an issue with that third-party storage device. You've got to call the other guys over there. You call them up, and you're getting kind of the same answer. We don't want to give you that runaround because we are striving to offer an all-in-one solution. Again, protection for your entire environment, the means to get that data off-site, keep it compliant, and have it immediately available for recovery. But I break the all-in-one solution down into really kind of two facets here, the local deployment as well as all of those off-site capabilities. And when we talk about the local deployment, another way to look at that is an example here. We borrowed this diagram from one of our competitors and some of their documentation. I removed the graphics for anonymity, but on the left you have a virtual environment, a couple of hosts running some VMs here, the vSphere for management, and the storage here for production. On the right, that solution has started to sprawl. It started with a backup server. They had to bring in their own database. As that environment continued to grow, well, now it's a larger environment. We've got to stand up individual proxies that we're now managing. The deduplication isn't great. We've got third-party storage. We wanted reporting capabilities, and now we've spun up another host. It requires a database here. It's more pieces and more management. As frequently as folks are trying to reduce that footprint, we're kind of working at odds with that goal, and a deployment of a Unitrend solution would look something like this, where your local backup and recovery capabilities are loaded into that purpose-built hardware appliance. It's powering all of your analytics and your reporting, your data reduction, your data deduplication engines live native on the appliance, ransomware detection, the ability to proactively monitor that hardware for potential drive failures or RAID errors, all included here. There are no proxies. You don't need to bring your own licensing. We're delivering that solution that's ready to plug and play, so to speak, out of the box. So when we're talking about that local solution, we want to arm customers to think about the recovery that they're going to need for their specific environment. When we say you can protect it all, we offer support for over 250 operating systems, applications, and hypervisors, and there are a number of ways in which you can protect that infrastructure. If you're looking for file-level protection, you can certainly deploy our agent. Well, hey, we've got a file system that's grown tremendously large, millions and millions of files. We're missing our backup window. Use the image agents and start taking backups at the block level. If you need instant recovery of your VMs, you can take those host-level backups or snapshots. For more application granularity, log truncation, quiescing, use that application agent. Even back up your production storage. So the way in which you can deploy the solution, we're almost working backwards. We want to think, how do you need to recover particular workloads or particular clients across your network? What's the right backup methodology to ensure that we can meet those goals from a compliance perspective in terms of the RPOs and the RTOs? Now, we've also sized out these appliances to enable our customers with typically 30 to 60 days of local retention on the appliance, but we do have built-in long-term retention schema where you can store key recovery points kind of along that GFS tape rotation. If you're an organization that for compliance standards needs to retain 7 years worth of backups, can set a schema to keep 7 yearly copies of data on the appliance. You can certainly replicate to another target. We're going to talk a little bit more about that deployment and getting the data off-site, but your reporting engines, your application And backup testing, instant lab capabilities are being powered by the appliance. We had mentioned data reduction and replication, bandwidth throttling, all being driven out of this single unit. Now, in addition to the backup and the recovery capabilities that we are enabling, the Unitrend solution also affords customers in a hardened environment against ransomware. We certainly recognize that it's a significant threat, and the global ransomware market is close to the point where it's going to outpace the illicit trade of I believe it's marijuana, cocaine, and heroin globally combined. It's about $3 trillion today, and they're estimating that will almost double to about a $6 trillion market for ransomware. It's a problem that we don't see going away anytime soon, but we take a three-pronged approach, kind of in between taking the backups and taking the recovery, some hardening to that environment, and also some confidence that we're providing for our users. It starts with prevention. The majority of binary that's being written and executed is targeting Windows-based systems, stealing common network credentials to spread and proliferate throughout the end user's environment. The Unitrend solution is written on a hardened Linux kernel, and this affords us two advantages. One, it's significantly less targeted, but it's also more customizable in how you can build out and architect those storage partitions. So we are landing all of our backups in an immutable repository. There is no write access to the backups once they have been landed within that partition. So even binary contained within a backup file would not be executing against backup files that have already been created. They're read only to the appliance, and because we have this hardened architecture, we're not landing those backups on a network share or network attached storage. A stolen Windows credential would not provide root access to the appliance and its storage. Now, on the front end, we're arming our customers with the ability to go on the offensive or be more proactive. There's a predictive analytics algorithm that analyzes the data from every backup that Unitrends creates and over time establishes baseline patterns of behavior for the clients across your network for which we are protecting. We're looking at values such as change rates, the overall entropy or the randomness of the data, levels of encryption, and when threat conditions are met, when those patterns or those baselines are broken, it triggers an alert through our UI dashboard, our trap notifications, email notifications, so that you can investigate, quarantine that machine, wipe it, and then leverage Unitrend's recovery assurance, that application-level testing of the backup files to identify a clean, usable point of restore. And just an example of what one of those alerts looks like here is that when you come into the console, we're going to identify the systems that are behaving anomalously, the initial source of that alert date, but also any updates. If we continue to see this behavior time after time, we're going to provide you with those updates again as you're going through kind of your backup history, trying to identify that point of restore. If it's not a backup that has been tested, we can start to see when that behavior was occurring and roll back before that infection or those symptoms were present on the machine. And I think that the biggest thing is that our users have a tremendous amount of confidence. There are a number of case studies, and I've been told the hyperlinks here are interactive, so if you want to click these and open up in your browser, there are a lot of folks from school districts to engineering companies that have leveraged Unitrends successfully to escape ransomware attacks or recover from multiple ransomware attacks. So it's one piece of our solution, again, to harden that environment through prevention, detection, and ultimately the confidence that you have in your ability to restore. Now, we've talked a lot about that local solution and local backup, but again, Unitrends is empowering customers to go beyond that local deployment. And our full kind of catalog of services and capabilities will start with local backup and recovery, but you can leverage Unitrends for offsite recovery to a DR site that you are managing yourself that's being powered by Unitrends hardware or software. You can leverage a public cloud environment, here with the slide. You can leverage a public cloud environment, a number of strategies for long-term data retention, and of course the Unitrends full-service DRaaS, our disaster recovery as a service. We're going to talk a little bit more about that as we move along here. I apologize. There must have been an animation in here that keeps pushing us forward. But for a lot of these, anytime we're landing backups and we'll be calling upon or may need to call upon those backups to recover them, it's the recovery assurance engine that's key with Unitrends. We're not just benchmarking compliance. We will spin up from the most recent backups in an isolated sandbox environment to benchmark recovery point and recovery time objectives, but you can also execute canned scripts against applications to certify the underlying data or applications. Run a test against your Active Directory domain service, IIS services, run SQL queries with expected output, verify the status of an instance, run tests against Exchange databases, and so much more. If you don't see the exact test that you're looking for among the 50-plus canned scripts, you've got the ability to write your own custom scripting, scan drives and folders for malware, and so on here. It's powered by our data copy access. We're running these tests frequently for our cloud customers. As part of our disaster recovery as a service, we're executing either weekly or monthly testing of those backup copies almost 50,000 times a year. But again, it's enabled our customers locally as well to identify where there may be roadblocks that could impede those roadmarks in advance with a screenshot verified backup. You know, they've booted that system, but they haven't logged in. They haven't verified the underlying data. Is the instance intact? Is the virus clean of infection? We've worked in some really worst case scenarios, customers that had screenshot verified backups restored from them to try and recover from ransomware, only to find that the backup files were infected as well. In a lot of cases, that malware is not going to disable your boot volume, your operating system. It wants you to be able to log in so that they can hit you with that splash screen and demand their extortion. But as a part of this testing, certainly successful tests are great, but I think even more important are where we can identify warnings or failures that may impede recovery. As we're breaking down this step and you're customizing this testing to define boot order, run ping tests, re-IP or reconfigure your machines anywhere where that recovery or that orchestration is not executing as it should, we're identifying that so that we can work with you to take steps to remediate any problems if or before they occur. So with that in mind and the different capabilities, we're really striving to raise the bar. Your traditional method or your kind of golden rule of data protection was that historical 3-2-1. 3 copies of the data in 2 different formats, one of which is going off-site. We're raising the stakes. Again, that first copy is going to be your production copy on-premise, your physical systems, virtual machines, primary storage, the application workloads themselves. The second copy is the backup file that's retained directly on the local appliance, and it's immediately available for recovery. Recover individual files, perform P2V restore of physical systems, instantly recover a virtual machine, carve out replicas in advance of your most mission-critical workloads. And then we're getting a copy off-site in kind of an air-gapped fashion, the archive or the cold copy. This may be disconnected from the network and stored in a fire-safe location, in a bank vault. It could be disk, it could be tape, it could be another storage device at a geographically redundant location. You could archive into the public cloud for retention. We've got hooks into Amazon S3 and S3IA, Google Cloud Storage, and Rackspace. The fourth copy is going to reside at the recovery site or be that hot copy where it's immediately available for recovery. And what's really powering DR for us here at Unitrends is replication either to one Unitrends appliance to another, again, in a site that you are managing or in an instance that you've deployed in the public cloud, or you can leverage Unitrends Cloud for that disaster recovery as a service. Before we talk about the public cloud, the Unitrends Cloud, I did want to outline a couple of the key use cases that we have for public cloud environments, and really migration, disaster recovery, retention of backup copies, and backing up those cloud workloads are key use cases for Unitrends in public cloud environments. And we're using a couple of different products to achieve this. For disaster recovery, as we had mentioned, you can deploy our software as a replication target that can live within Amazon or Azure. You can deploy that backup software directly from those clouds' respective marketplaces, stand that up as an instance, and receive backup copies from the primary site where they're available for DR into an AWS or an Azure instance. You can replicate, again, those backup copies to the public cloud. You can back up production workloads. We do support a number of cloud formats for backup. The really neat little tool there, that second logo, the boomerang piece, is one of my favorite solutions in the portfolio. It's for use with VMware environments today and really helps serve cloud migration and disaster recovery. When you install Boomerang locally, it installs as a VM within your VMware environment and you group your other guests into what it calls protection groups. Those protection groups are paired with a bucket path into S3 or Azure Blob Storage, and you replicate the VM blocks to that cold storage. You're not consuming any cloud compute or CPU resources at this time, just the storage. Now, with the goal of migration or disaster recovery in mind, you can push button deploy those blocks into a running cloud instance, and the Boomerang tool will natively convert into that cloud's format. There's no manual configuration required. So we would move that VMDK, convert it into an AMI from S3 into EC2, for example, configure the EC2 instance, attach the EBS storage volumes. It's a push button deploy. Now, if your goal is migration, once the workloads have been deployed, you simply let the license expire. If the goal is disaster recovery, when you're ready to return operations to the local site after deploying in the public cloud, you can either turn off those instances and restore the blocks from that cold storage bucket back down to your local environment, or you could even reverse migrate or copy back down the running instance and reverse format that AMI back into a VMDK and return that instance to your local vCenter environment. Really cool couple of use cases, a very powerful tool. We had a customer of ours actually down in Australia migrate 700 VMs and deploy them into AWS over a weekend. I think it was something like 72 hours or so. Really powerful tool. Now, the public cloud provides a lot of options, but for a lot of customers, the Unitrends cloud has been incredibly attractive, and we do things a little bit differently. As I had mentioned, it is a purpose-built cloud environment, so we are not AWS, we are not Azure, so it's not a kind of build whatever you want within the Unitrends cloud. We've designed it to deliver two key services for our customers. The first is long-term retention of their data, and for a lot of our users, about one in three today is a Unitrends cloud user. It's been a predictable model. It's easy to forecast the year-over-year TCO. Because we're managing that back-end environment, we're not charging you on the storage used in the cloud. We license out capacity for retention based on the local footprint, and we do so in increments of 500 gigs, so you can be fairly granular here. You can start small and grow that storage as needed. We offer a number of retention policies from 90 days, 1 to 7 years, even infinite retention, and the backups are stored for you on a GFS rotation schema. So once that retention has been built, you will have access to your most recent 7 daily backup copies as well as the most recent successful backup group from each of the last 4 weeks, 12 months, and the subscribed number of years. There are no fees to send data to the Unitrends cloud or to recover it, and recovery from your cloud-based backup copies is from your same local UI. There's a small filter in the Recover tab where you view the backup copies that are hot on the target, and you can view the recovery points that you have within the Unitrends cloud environment. You can immediately mount a file-level recovery object and download back individual files and folders, perform that granular recovery from the cloud stack, or import the entire backup group down to your source appliance to initiate full recovery of a system, all with no additional fees or charges. It's just capacity and retention. And it is a compliant cloud. We meet the standards and the mandates for SSAE 18, SOC 2 Type 2 audits, CGIS, GDPR. By leveraging our AES-256-bit encryption, certain retention periods, we can help organizations maintain HIPAA compliance, whether that's 7 years retention, infinite retention, as well as adhering strictly to data sovereignty, operating cloud data centers in 5 different countries. The data, while redundant within the country of origin, will never leave that country of origin. So we're not replicating U.S. data into Canada or vice versa. We adhere strictly to their laws. Now, beyond the long-term retention piece is our hands-free disaster recovery as a service. And for our cloud users, every 3 out of 5 cloud users has at least one instance of Unitrends DRaaS, and for a lot of our customers, it's reduced or enabled them to eliminate the cost and the complexity of managing their own colo or their own DR site. It is a hands-free failover process. You simply make a phone call, and we initiate that spin-up, and our services team is doing all of the heavy lifting. So it starts with a consulting engagement with our Cloud Course team, identifying the protected systems, recovery point, recovery time objectives, and the compliance goals that we are trying to meet. And as we're configuring your isolated environment for failover in the cloud stack, we're going through and mapping through the networking configurations to mirror your production environment, determining firewall rules, QoS, provisioning public-facing IPs if you ever needed to host your website out of the Unitrends cloud, defining boot order and interoperability, so that we're fully prepared and have fully vetted that cloud stack for when we receive that declaration. We run frequent testing, either weekly or monthly testing of that cloud stack with recovery assurance, and report back to our DRaaS customers to ensure that we are compliant and their needs will be able to be met in the event of a declaration. And we're so confident in this service, we've provided it now for a number of years. The SLAs that we provide are based on the recovery time objective, or your RTO, and they are contractually guaranteed. We offer a 1 hour, 24 hour, and best effort SLA. For those two levels of service, 1 hour and 24 hour, if we were ever unable to meet those, there is recourse for our customers. Those SLAs are guaranteed and contracted in writing. We have never missed, in our years of service performing DRaaS, have never missed a customer SLA. The longest it's taken our team to boot and have available a system was about 18 minutes. It was a multi-tiered ERP application for one of our clients. And just one story I wanted to share is a customer of our safety products. And you can check this case study out in a little bit more detail on the website. But before leveraging Unitrends, they were operating a couple of locations. Their primary location is in Lakeland, Florida. They had a second manufacturing site up in Georgia, and they're developing or manufacturing devices and equipment for use by construction, public works, think traffic cones, signage, hydration packs, hard hats, reflective vests, things of that nature. Really key to their operations was that multi-tiered ERP application. Before Unitrends, they were trying to leverage some native VMware replication with some third-party storage, and they could never quite get the thing to work. They had three key environments: physical Windows and Linux, as well as some virtualized Windows servers on VMware. So they opted to take a look at Unitrends and actually decided to deploy our virtual appliance. If you want to use your existing compute and storage resources, you can deploy Unitrends as a virtual appliance. But they also, recognizing that their main manufacturing center was in kind of Hurricane Alley in Florida, they wanted to replicate to the Unitrends cloud, and they enrolled a couple of those key machines, including that ERP, in our disaster recovery as a service. They deployed Unitrends earlier in 2017, and months after deploying Hurricane Irma. They're tracking that as it's kind of making its way up the Atlantic. It passes through, I think it was Bermuda, or I'm mixing up my islands here, but it's making its way towards landfall, and they recognize, tracking the storm, that the majority of the damage, that main vector, their site is directly in the path here. So about 5 days before landfall, their CTO called Unitrends to declare a disaster. We brought their environment up in the Unitrends cloud, provided them with the IPsec tunnel so that they could start to reroute their traffic, and they had their employees routed out of the path of the storm. They were working safely either from remote locations or moved to that facility in Georgia until they were ready to resume production at the Lakeland campus. When the storm had passed through, our team assists in actively helping the customer fail back. We seed an appliance with the most recent data from the cloud stack, overnight that to the customer so that they can begin import and start to sync up those last delta changes before returning production to their primary environment. Kind of one case study or one customer story I'd love to share with folks, because it's a question that we get all the time. You know, it sounds like a great service. Has anyone ever had to use it? Do you ever get that phone call? And the answer is absolutely yes. You can click on that link there to read a little bit more about their experience in the full document here. But at this point, I would like to offer again some additional resources before I turn things over to David for the Q&A. If you'd like to get in touch with any of our experts, you can certainly grab our toll-free inbound line, submit request for contact information. We have got demos on demand. You can run a full feature trial of our software. And for myself, would love to hear from you. My email address is right up on the screen there. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn as well. If you have any questions or if I can be of a resource, I'd be happy to assist or stay in touch with folks. It's always great to have the opportunity to come out and present here. So I'll leave this up for a moment if folks want to grab anything, and turn it back over to you, David, to see if any questions had come in on the Q&A.
Absolutely. Yeah. Great presentation, Adam. I do want to point out to the audience out there that the links on the screen are clickable. So if you just mouse over any of those on the screen and click over that link in the slides window, it will open a new window in your browser. And so you can easily take advantage of those. You don't have to try to type them in or write them down. So I'll bring up that poll question here in just a moment. But let's see. First question that came in, Stefan is asking, does Unitrends offer block level restore for their DRaaS back to on-premises?
So we would we can deploy our block agent and protect workloads with our DRaaS. Typically, what that process would look like is that we would seed the backups that we are taking in the cloud stack and seed those onto an appliance. So if you wanted to be taking those image-based backups, we'll continue to follow the backup methodology once you're running in the Unitrends cloud as you were performing on-premise. That's all defined during the onboarding. If we've got particular workloads that are going to be captured at the block level or the host level, we're going to adhere to that same backup methodology. So you would have an image-based backup group on that new appliance that's been seeded and overnighted to you. You would import that image or that backup into the source appliance or the replacement appliance to start initiating recovery of the local system. So you can use, absolutely, the image agent to recover those blocks from the cloud. Typically, we try to stay away from downloading over the WAN where there may be, we may run into issues with latency or bandwidth. So we do like to physically seed an appliance or a NAS device to overnight, but there are a few other options, and I think there was a link earlier about the DRaaS schedule that you could read a little bit more information or certainly check out the FAQ as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, very cool. Okay. Another question here. David is asking, do you offer a virtual appliance?
So we do, and David, my apologies, I should have mentioned that on the local deployment. But yes, you can deploy a Unitrends virtual appliance on top of VMware, Hyper-V, Citrix Zen, or Nutanix AHV. We'll integrate natively with any of those hypervisors, and you still have access to any of the agents that you would need, the file level, image level, application agents as required, but you can leverage existing compute and storage with the virtual appliance.
Okay, very nice. Lots of options there. And I want to call everyone's attention to the question on the screen. What additional information would you like? I'll just leave that up there while we do some more Q&A. Troy said, the immediate remote capabilities sound awesome in the presentation. George said, great presentation. Let's see, another question here. James is asking, can I manage my own DR site with a Unitrends appliance and still use the cloud?
So, James, yes, you can. We, with our fan-out replication, one appliance can send hot copy backups to multiple targets. So we would really see that in kind of one of two ways. You can replicate to the DR site and maintain that DR site, and you could replicate from our hardware to our software, kind of any combination there. It all looks the same. It's a Unitrends appliance. You can manage your own DR and leverage the Unitrends cloud for something like long-term retention. On the other hand, users may want to maintain their own copies with removable media such as disk or tape and enroll key workloads in our DRaaS. You can really mix and match. There's a tremendous amount of flexibility.
Very nice. Very nice. I like that. Another question, does Unitrends offer a hardware replacement upgrade plan? So what happens when your existing hardware on premises that you're using from Unitrends for backup gets old, essentially, and needs to be refreshed? How does that work?
If it's getting a little bit older, or probably more commonly, the environment has grown here, we do take careful steps to really size out our customers for 3 to 5 years of growth. But like any metal component with moving pieces, things eventually will start to age out. We do offer a hardware replacement program. It's called Unitrends Pledge. So when you sign up for your support agreement, you can add in that pledge agreement. And when you maintain 48 months of pledge, so on entering into the 4th year of ownership of your appliance, you are eligible for a free replacement, and we will replace your appliance with the current iteration that is either of equal or greater capacity. So if you were running a 16 terabyte appliance 4 years down the road, you've maintained pledge, you're ready to refresh. Well, hey, we eliminated the 16 terabyte box. Now we move you into the next up. You'd get either an equivalent capacity or maybe one that's a little bit larger depending on how those models shake out in terms of sizing, but absolutely can enroll in hardware replacement.
Okay, very nice. That's good. It's something that people might not always think about. Another question here. One of my clients has been struggling with restore times for a bunch of their SQL databases. Is there anything that Unitrends has that might help?
So for SQL, and this would go back to the image agent, I think when I had mentioned earlier, it's great for systems with tremendously large file accounts. The image agent is also VSS aware and will operate with VSS full. So we can come in and truncate logs. The applications will record as being backed up. We will quiesce them so that they're in a consistent state. But we do have that VSS full and VSS aware integration with that image agent, and has been really helpful for a lot of folks. Similarly with SQL, if you're struggling meeting restore times, I think in a lot of cases you're going to see increased speed and reliability with that image agent, but it still provides you some of that application processing, such as the log truncation, point-in-time restore abilities. You kind of roll back by leveraging that agent. Might be one thing I would recommend from Unitrends.
Okay, very nice. It's great to have that capability available there, because everybody has some sort of database. So I know that agent can help. Another question: what about global deduplication? How does that work?
So Unitrends, with our global deduplication, the appliance is we are ingesting a block for a new backup that's being created. It's going to compare the incoming blocks against every block that has been stored on the appliance. So there are some vendors that are operating based on the job-based deduplication, but in a lot of cases there will be common blocks throughout an environment, especially if you're running similar software, similar operating systems. So Unitrends is only ever storing a unique block once. In a lot of cases where we're deduplicating against that entire volume, you're going to see some really high data reduction ratios. And with that global deduplication, in a lot of cases, it's eliminated the need for that third-party storage device, your data domains, your exagrids, because the data reduction techniques on the appliance are pretty powerful. But we're comparing any incoming block against all of the blocks that have already been stored by the appliance, and only ever storing each block once. A pointer or that marker would be applied to any redundant blocks that are coming in, but it would not be stored twice. In a lot of cases, we've seen data reduction hovering anywhere from 12, 15, even 20 to 1 in some cases. Kind of mileage will vary depending on what you're backing up. Some images or CAD files, if you're in engineering, may not dedupe or compress all that well, but typically pretty powerful deduplication.
Very nice, very nice. So let's see, last question I think we have time for, and that is, how should people get started with Unitrends? What's the first step?
I think that we've got a lot of great resources on unitrends.com, from the on-demand demos, the free trial licensing, but even just getting in touch with us. You can engage with those resources, but I would highly encourage you to check out unitrends.com, especially for a lot of folks, install the trial licensing in your environment and play around with it and see if, is it giving you a way to automate something that you hadn't been able to automate before? Is it streamlining your operations? Can we reduce clicks or even jumping between, different windows? I would really encourage folks to try it out for themselves. We've got teams available to help you through that trial process. But even if you'd like, some more information, you can use that, the request for contact form, request quote, a lot of great resources, but unitrends.com would be the place for me where I would start.
Awesome. All right. Well, great presentation, Adam. Thank you so much for being on the event today.
Absolutely, David. It was my pleasure. Really appreciate it, and thanks for everyone that came on and hung through us into the third hour here. Really appreciate it, everyone.
Excellent. And there's a couple questions there I put in the queue for you there, Adam. Perhaps you can respond to those after the event here. I know we're about to wrap up. Thank you again to Unitrends for supporting today's event. For more information, like Adam said, visit unitrends.com, sign up for a trial, and learn more. All right, excellent. It's now time for our final prize giveaway on the event today. We have a final Amazon $500 gift card going to Matt Morris of Ohio. Congratulations, Matt Morris of Ohio. And our final Alienware Aurora gaming desktop is going to Christopher Sacco from Oregon. Congratulations, Christopher Sacco from Oregon. Before you go, I want to remind you to subscribe to the 10 on Tech podcast over in the iTunes store, and make sure you follow Actual Tech Media over on LinkedIn. If you're a potential sponsor of an upcoming event and you'd like to present, reach out to us at connect@actualtechmedia.com. And I hope that you'll join us next Wednesday. We're running a special EcoCast entitled Supporting Microsoft-Centric Environments, featuring Dhruva, Open Systems, and SolarWinds. Hope to see you on that EcoCast a week from today. Thank you again for joining today's event. I hope that you enjoyed the event. I hope you learned a lot and got all your questions answered. We'll see you next time. Have a great day.